I still remember the way my mom used to look at me, not angry, not disappointed, just unimpressed. Like every time I tried, I was proving her right all over again. My name's Ryan. I'm 32 now, but back then I was just a lanky kid with bad hair and big dreams that nobody in my family thought would amount to anything. If you asked my mom, she'd tell you she had 2 kids, one prodigy and one realist. The prodigy was my sister, Claire, 2 years older, always perfect. The kind of person who could spill soup and somehow make it look elegant. Straight A's, debate team, student body president. She was my mom's entire world. And me? I was the afterthought. The one she'd pat on the shoulder and say, "Maybe college isn't for everyone, honey." I used to laugh it off. What else could I do? My mom had this way of turning every conversation into a backhanded compliment. If Claire brought home a trophy, she'd host a little dinner party for it. If I brought home a good grade, she'd smile politely and say something like, "That's great, sweetie. See what happens when you actually focus." I told myself she meant well, that maybe she was just trying to motivate me. But as I got older, it became painfully clear that she just didn't see me as the kind of person who could ever succeed. Dad wasn't much help either. He was quieter, more neutral. He'd nod when Mom talked, occasionally shoot me a look like he wanted to say something encouraging but couldn't find the words. Claire had this way of making him proud without trying. She'd walk into a room, and it was like gravity shifted toward her. I'd be sitting there, trying to talk about something I was working on, a little coding project, a freelance gig, whatever, and Mom would cut in with, "Ryan, can you not interrupt?" Claire was talking, and then the conversation would just drift back to her, as if I'd never opened my mouth. The difference between us wasn't just grades. It was treatment. Claire got everything first: the new phone, the car, the emergency credit card. When she wanted to take a gap year before college, Mom called it soul-searching. When I said I wanted to work for a year before applying to school, she said, "Don't be lazy." And when the topic of the college fund came up, that sacred family savings account my grandparents had set aside for our education, Mom would always remind us both, "It's for whoever needs it most." I was naive enough to believe that meant both of us equally. That illusion didn't last. The summer after high school, Claire got into Stanford. My mom cried for 2 days straight. Not because she'd miss her, but because she'd have something new to brag about. "My daughter's going to Stanford," she'd tell anyone who'd listen. "She's going to change the world." Meanwhile, I decided to attend a state university. It wasn't glamorous, but it was affordable, and I'd worked hard to get in. I still remember telling my mom at dinner one night. She didn't even look up from her phone. "That's good, Ryan. I'm glad you're being realistic." I thought it was just her usual tone. Dismissive, sure, but familiar. But then she dropped the bomb 2 weeks before tuition was due. "Ryan," she said, as if she were reading off a grocery list, "we used the college fund for Claire's down payment." I blinked, waiting for her to laugh. She didn't. "What?" I asked, thinking I must have misheard her. "The college fund. You know, for school." She sighed like I was being difficult. "Ryan, your sister's tuition is covered by scholarships and grants. But she needs a safe place to live off campus. A good environment helps her focus. You'll be fine. You can take out a loan or start at community college. Be realistic." I remember feeling something twist inside me. It wasn't even anger at first, more like disbelief, the kind that makes your stomach drop before your brain catches up. "You used my money for her house," I said quietly. Mom crossed her arms. "It wasn't your money. It was for your education, and clearly, Claire's education is the priority right now. You'll understand when you're older." I didn't say anything after that. Dad muttered something about not having a say, and Claire just stared down at her phone, pretending to scroll. That was her thing. When things got messy, she went invisible. No eye contact, no opinions, just silence that made it impossible to hate her outright. The perfect daughter, even in guilt. That was the night something inside me shifted. I didn't scream or throw things. I just got up, walked outside, and sat on the porch until sunrise. My mom probably thought I was sulking, but I wasn't. I was thinking about how every time she'd told me to be realistic, what she really meant was stay small. About how every decision in that house revolved around Claire, and how no one, not once, had believed in me enough to think I could build something of my own. So I decided I would. It wasn't some dramatic movie moment where I swore revenge under the moonlight. It was quieter than that. I just made a choice, one that I never told them about. I decided I was done asking for permission to matter. I spent the next few years grinding harder than I ever had in my life. I couldn't afford a 4-year university, so I took a few night classes while working full-time at a tech repair shop. The pay was lousy, the hours long, and the customers unpredictable, but it taught me things no class ever could: how to talk to people, how to solve problems, how to think on my feet. I started doing small freelance jobs on the side, mostly fixing software bugs for local businesses or designing websites for cheap. My mom would still call occasionally, mostly to update me on Claire's latest milestone. She got promoted. She's dating someone from her firm. She's moving to California permanently. It was always Claire this, Claire that. I'd say that's great, and she'd respond with, "Don't be jealous, honey. Everyone's path is different." She never once asked how mine was going. By my mid-20s, I'd built a modest list of clients. Nothing crazy, just enough to pay rent and keep the lights on. But I was learning what worked, what didn't, what people were willing to pay for. I started noticing patterns, small inefficiencies in the way small businesses handled their online systems. One night, out of pure curiosity, I built a software tool to automate one of those problems. It wasn't much, but a local business owner paid me $500 for it. Then another paid $700. Before long, word started to spread. I didn't realize it at the time, but that little side project would change my entire life. Of course, Mom had no idea. As far as she was concerned, I was still figuring things out. She'd tell her friends I did computer stuff. In that tone parents use when they don't really understand but don't care enough to ask. Meanwhile, she'd visit Claire in her nice suburban home, the same one bought with my college fund, and post pictures on Facebook with captions like "So proud of my girls," even though I wasn't in a single one. The irony didn't hit me until years later. She thought I was invisible because I didn't brag. She mistook quiet progress for failure. The last time I saw her before everything changed was at Christmas, when I was 26. I had just landed my first big client, a mid-sized logistics company willing to pay real money for my software. I was nervous but proud. I tried to tell her about it over dinner. She barely listened. "That's nice, honey," she said, pouring herself another glass of wine. "Maybe one day you'll get a real job." Claire chuckled, like it was a harmless joke. But something about it stung deeper than usual. Maybe because I was finally starting to believe I could make it. And hearing her say that felt like being shoved back into the box she'd built for me. That night, as they all laughed in the living room, I sat outside on the porch again. Same spot, same feeling. That cold clarity where you realize you're on your own. But this time, it wasn't loneliness I felt. It was determination. Because what my mom didn't know, what she would never have believed, was that I was already building something big. And one day, it would all come back around. That, one day, started much sooner than she ever expected. It began with a phone call. A call that would completely turn the power dynamic in my family upside down. And I'll never forget the sound of my mom's voice when she realized who she was talking to. It was a Thursday afternoon when my phone lit up with a number I hadn't seen in months. My mom's name blinked across the screen. I stared at it for a long second, debating whether to pick up. The last time we'd talked, she'd spent 20 minutes explaining how life just isn't fair because Claire's company hadn't given her the promotion she wanted. I hadn't said more than 3 words the whole call. Still, curiosity got the better of me. I answered. "Ryan." "Hi, sweetheart," she said, her voice sugary sweet, the kind she only used when she wanted something. "You sound busy. Are you busy?" I glanced at the multiple tabs open on my laptop, the half-finished code, the invoices waiting for approval. "A little. What's up?" "Well," she started, dragging out the word like she was easing into bad news. "Your sister's moving into her new place next month, and we were wondering if you could come help with the move. You're good with heavy lifting, right?" I bit back a sigh. Her new place? Didn't she already have a house? "Oh, that was years ago," Mom said casually. "She sold that one. She and Eric bought a bigger home closer to the city. It's such a beautiful neighborhood, gated, near the water, amazing schools. You'll see when you come by." "I didn't know she got married," I said. Mom chuckled. "Engaged. Not married yet. He's a lawyer. Very successful. You'll like him." Of course he was. Claire's type was practically trademarked. Tall, clean-cut, ambitious, and conveniently useful to Mom's social circle. I should have been happy for her, but I couldn't ignore the twinge in my chest. That familiar reminder that I was never invited to things like this until someone needed free labor. I don't think I'll be able to make it, I said finally. There was a long pause, then that disappointed tone she'd perfected over the years. Ryan, she's your sister. She helped you plenty of times when you were younger. Helped me? I almost laughed. The last time Claire helped me, she'd borrowed my car in college and returned it with a dent in the door, then told Mom it was my fault for not maintaining it properly. I still remembered paying for the repair myself because Claire has enough stress already. I've got work, I said. I'm on a deadline. She sighed dramatically. You're always so busy lately. You used to have time for family. Family. That word always felt heavy when she used it. Like a tool instead of a truth. I'll call you later, Mom. I hung up before she could say anything else. That was how most of our conversations went after that. Her asking for favors, me declining, her pretending to be hurt. Sometimes she'd send me pictures of family gatherings I wasn't invited to, claiming they just assumed I was busy. Other times she'd make little jabs about how Claire was really making something of herself, and how she hoped I'd find something stable soon. The thing was, I had found something stable. My small software company had just landed 3 new clients, and I was finally starting to earn enough to pay off my student loans and upgrade from my tiny studio apartment. But I didn't tell her that. I'd learned the hard way that every time I shared good news, she found a way to twist it. Like the time I mentioned I'd hired my first employee, a college kid helping with back-end code. Mom's response: that's risky. You can barely take care of yourself. What if it doesn't work out? Or when I said I was thinking about moving into a better apartment. Maybe wait until you're more established. You don't want to overreach. Overreach. That was her favorite word. It meant don't dream too big. So I stopped talking about my dreams altogether. Then came Claire's engagement party. The invitation wasn't from Mom. It was from Claire herself. A neatly written email with gold foil font and everything. She'd CC'd Mom, Dad, and a bunch of her friends. The subject line said, "Join us for our next big chapter." I stared at it for a while, unsure if I even wanted to go. Part of me wanted to decline. The other part, the quieter, stubborn part, wanted to show up, if only to remind them I existed. So I went. The venue was a rented hall near the coast, all white marble floors and tall windows overlooking the bay. Everything screamed money. Soft jazz playing in the background, tables lined with champagne flutes, a floral archway in pastel tones. I showed up in a decent blazer, nothing fancy. Mom took one look at me and frowned. "Oh, Ryan," she said, her smile tight. "You didn't dress up?" "I did," I said simply. She sighed, tugging at my sleeve like she could fix me by adjusting my clothes. "You could have borrowed one of your father's suits. This is a formal event." I looked around. Half the guests were in cocktail attire. My outfit was fine. But of course, it wasn't about clothes. It was about optics. In her mind, I was the blemish on her perfect family portrait. When Claire walked in, all conversation stopped. She looked radiant, in that movie scene kind of way. She spotted me and smiled. A genuine one, at least, before being swept up by a crowd of guests congratulating her and her fiancé. I stayed near the bar, quietly sipping soda, invisible as usual. Halfway through the evening, I overheard something that made my stomach knot. Mom was standing near a group of her friends, champagne glass in hand. "Both of my kids turned out so differently," she said with a little laugh. "Claire's the driven one. She always had big dreams. Ryan's more simple. He likes to tinker with computers and all that. But that's okay. Not everyone can be a star." The women laughed politely. I froze. I don't know why it hit harder that night than all the other times she'd belittled me. Maybe because I'd been working 12-hour days to keep my business afloat. Maybe because I'd come there hoping, just hoping, she'd see me differently after all these years. I left early, without saying goodbye. Claire texted me the next morning. "Sorry about Mom. She had too much to drink." I never responded. For months after that, I distanced myself completely. I stopped answering her calls. When she left voicemails asking why I was being dramatic, I deleted them. It wasn't even anger anymore. It was self-preservation. Every conversation drained me, chipped away at whatever confidence I had built. But just because I stopped talking to her didn't mean she stopped talking about me. One of my cousins messaged me on Facebook around that time. "Hey man, heard your company went under. You okay?" I blinked. "What? Who told you that?" "Your mom mentioned it at Thanksgiving." I stared at my screen, my jaw tightening. My company was doing fine, thriving, actually. But to her, admitting that would mean she was wrong about me. So she spread the opposite story. That's when I realized she didn't just underestimate me. She needed me to fail. Because if I succeeded, it would unravel the entire narrative she'd built her life around. That Claire was the shining star, and I was the cautionary tale. So I did what she least expected. I went silent, and I worked harder than ever. While she was busy showing off Claire's wedding invitations and house renovations, I was finalizing contracts, expanding my client base, and setting up meetings with investors. My little side project had grown into a real company, one that businesses were starting to take seriously. It wasn't glamorous yet, but it was mine. Every late night, every self-taught skill, every risk, it all started paying off. And yet, even as my life changed, I couldn't shake that voice in my head. The one that sounded exactly like her. Be realistic. That voice followed me everywhere. When I was pitching my first big client, I heard it whispering, "They'll never take you seriously." When I signed my first real contract, it muttered, "Don't get ahead of yourself." It took years before I realized the only way to silence it was to prove it wrong. Not just to her, but to myself. Then one day, Mom called again. This time, it wasn't small talk. There was tension in her voice. "Ryan, honey," she began carefully, "your sister's having a little issue." I sat back, already sensing the setup. What kind of issue? Well, her fiancé's law firm isn't doing as well as they expected, and the market's been rough. They're a bit tight on cash right now. I told her you might be able to help. Help how? Just a small loan, she said quickly. Temporary, of course. You're doing well now, right? You could spare a little. I felt my heart pound, not in shock, but in disbelief at how effortlessly she shifted from mocking to asking. You want me to give Claire money? Not give, she corrected. Lend. Family helps family, Ryan. I let out a quiet laugh. Like how you helped me with college. The silence on the other end was sharp. That's not fair, she said finally. We did what we thought was best for the family. Right, I said. For the family. She changed the subject quickly, pretending not to hear the bitterness in my voice. But something in me cracked that day, not from anger, but clarity. She would never change. To her, I'd always be the backup plan. The fixer. The one who didn't matter until he became useful. That realization didn't make me sad this time. It made me focused. Because now, for the first time, I had the power to choose how the story ended. And the next time she tried to use me to prop up her perfect daughter, I wasn't just going to say no. I was going to make her remember every single time she told me to be realistic. And I'd do it in a way she'd never forget. The next few months after that call were oddly quiet, too quiet. My mom had this pattern. She'd call, ask for something, I'd refuse, and then there'd be silence while she regrouped for the next attempt. So when 3 months passed without a word, I figured she'd finally moved on. I was wrong. The betrayal didn't happen like a thunderclap. It crept up slowly, the kind of thing you only notice when it's already too late to stop. It started with an email. I'd just come out of a meeting with a potential investor, one that could take my company to the next level. My phone buzzed as I got in the car, and I saw an unfamiliar name in my inbox. David Harlan, senior partner, Harlan & Associates. My first thought was that it might be a client inquiry. I opened it, half distracted. Mr. Ryan Carter, it read. We recently received your contact information from a family member, Mrs. Elaine Carter. She mentioned you were seeking a financial advisor for your business and recommended we reach out. Please let us know a convenient time to discuss how we can support your investment portfolio. I frowned. I had never asked my mom to find me an advisor, and I sure as hell hadn't given her permission to share my business information with anyone. My portfolio? My company wasn't even public. I scrolled down and saw a scanned referral form attached, signed by my mother. It listed my company name, partial financial details, and even my projected revenue for the next quarter, numbers only a few people knew. I felt a rush of heat climb my neck. That data wasn't public. I told her nothing about my finances. So how did she? Then I saw it. The referral included a note in her handwriting. Ryan has been struggling to manage his business accounts responsibly and could use professional guidance. Please reach out to him before he makes another risky decision. I just stared at the screen, frozen. It was such a small thing, but it cut deeper than any insult ever had. Because it wasn't just meddling, it was sabotage. She'd taken the one thing I'd built entirely on my own and painted me as some clueless kid who needed saving. For a moment, I actually laughed, That hollow, disbelieving laugh that comes right before anger hits full force. Then I sat there, gripping the steering wheel, trying to calm my breathing. She'd done it again. Undermined me. Publicly. Quietly. Completely. I called her immediately. She picked up on the second ring, chipper as ever. Ryan, what a nice surprise. Why did you give my financial information to a stranger? I asked, my voice shaking slightly. There was a pause. Oh, that. Don't be dramatic, honey. He's a friend of a friend, a reputable advisor. I was just trying to help. Help? I repeated. By telling him I can't manage my own business? You sent my numbers, Mom. My private company data. She sighed, like I was being unreasonable. Ryan, you've always been so sensitive about these things. I was just trying to make sure you're not getting in over your head. I worry about you, you know. You're not exactly financially minded. Not financially minded, I said, disbelief spilling into my tone. I built a profitable company from scratch. I've been managing contracts, payroll, taxes, everything on my own for years. Well, she said lightly, I just thought maybe someone with experience could help polish things up. You don't want to embarrass yourself in front of real investors, do you? I went silent, because if I said anything, I might have said something I couldn't take back. Finally, I managed, don't ever do that again. Oh, come on, she said. You're overreacting. It's not like I gave him your passwords. I hung up. For days after, I couldn't focus. Every line of code I wrote blurred together. I kept seeing her handwriting in my head. Those words, struggling to manage his business responsibly. That wasn't concern. That was control disguised as care. A week later, I got a call from my bank. Mr. Carter, we received a request to review your account activity for possible fraud, the manager said. Apparently, a relative expressed concern about irregular transfers. My heart sank. A relative? Yes, ma'am, Elaine Carter. That's when the full picture clicked into place. She wasn't just trying to help. She was trying to take over. See, my mom had this obsession with appearances, the kind that went beyond vanity. To her, control was everything. Control over her family, her image, her narrative. And my growing success was a threat to that control. If I became truly independent, not just financially, but emotionally, it meant she no longer had power over me. So she did what she always did. She manipulated the story. She'd tell relatives I was struggling with my finances, that I was too proud to ask for help. I didn't find out until my aunt called, worried, asking if I was okay. When I told her the truth, that the company was thriving, she sounded confused. Your mother said you were having trouble paying rent. Rent. I own my apartment. That was when something inside me broke. Not the angry kind of break, more like when a bridge finally gives out after years of quiet strain. I stopped giving her the benefit of the doubt. Then came the moment that truly sealed it. The betrayal that went from personal to business. It was late one night when I got an email from one of my biggest clients, a logistics firm I'd been working with for almost 2 years. They'd been a huge part of my revenue stream, and I'd built their custom software myself. The email subject read, "Concerns regarding company stability." My stomach dropped. The message was polite but pointed. "We were recently contacted by someone claiming to be a financial representative of your family, suggesting your business may not be stable enough for continued partnership. Could you please confirm the status of your company?" Attached was a voicemail transcription, and even before I played it, I knew the voice. "Hello, this is Elaine Carter, Ryan's mother," it began. "I just wanted to let you know that he's been having some personal and financial issues. I'd hate for your company to be negatively impacted if things go south. Maybe reconsider any large-scale contracts for now." I sat there, numb, my hand frozen over the mouse. She'd actually called one of my clients. Pretended to represent me. Tried to scare them off. It took me hours to decide what to do. I could have called her, screamed, demanded an apology, but I didn't. Instead, I called the client directly, explained everything, and emailed them proof of my company's clean financials. They were sympathetic, thankfully, and agreed to continue working with me. But they were cautious now. That single act had shaken their trust, and it cost me weeks of damage control. When I finally confronted her, I didn't even raise my voice. "Why would you call one of my clients?" I asked. She didn't hesitate. "Because you weren't listening to me. You're taking on too much, Ryan. I was worried you'd embarrass yourself again." "Again?" I repeated. "When did I ever?" She cut me off. "You've always needed guidance, but you refuse to take it. You think you know everything, but you're still that lost boy tinkering with computers in his bedroom. I'm trying to protect you from yourself. Protect me. That was her word for sabotage. I don't need your protection, I said, my voice cold. I need you to stop ruining everything I build. There was silence. Then, in that familiar condescending tone, she said, you wouldn't have anything to build if it weren't for us. Who paid for your first computer? Who raised you? Who gave you a roof over your head? And there it was. The guilt card. The one she always played when cornered. I hung up without replying. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel anger. I felt clarity. Pure, unshakable clarity. I realized my mom didn't just doubt me. She resented that I'd built something she couldn't control. And the more successful I became, the more desperate she grew to remind me that she still had power. That night, I deleted her number. Not out of rage, but resolve. But of course, when you cut off someone who feeds on control, they don't disappear quietly. They come back louder. And when she did, she didn't just want to get back into my life. She wanted to tear it apart. It started with my sister. When Claire called, her voice carried that polished calm that always made me uneasy, the kind of calm that hides bad news behind polite syllables. Hey, Ree, she said too softly. Mom told me you've been distant lately. Everything okay? It had been months since I'd heard her voice, but she still sounded the same. Careful, rehearsed, like every sentence went through a filter before it reached her tongue. I'm fine, I said. Just busy. I know, she replied. Mom said your business is doing okay? I could practically hear the question mark at the end. That subtle doubt, wrapped in sisterly concern. It stung more than I wanted to admit. It's doing great, actually, I said. She hesitated. Oh, that's good. There was a pause, long enough for me to know she wasn't calling just to check in. Look, I'll just say it, she said finally. Eric and I are going through some things. Financially. I didn't respond. We invested in a property development deal that didn't pan out. Lost a big chunk of our savings. It's just bad timing. I'm sorry to hear that, I said flatly. She exhaled. Mom thought maybe you could help us get back on our feet. Just a loan. Nothing crazy. There it was again. The family pattern. The same rhythm every time. A crisis. Then my mom's voice behind it, pushing someone toward me. Claire, I said slowly. You know I love you, but I can't be the family's safety net. I worked too hard to get where I am. I get it, she said quickly, but her tone shifted, defensive, almost irritated. It's not like we're asking for charity. You've got money now, right? You could help without even noticing. I let out a short, humorless laugh. You know what's funny? 10 years ago, Mom emptied my college fund for your down payment. She said I needed to be realistic. You remember that? She went silent. I took out loans, worked nights, lived in a one-room apartment that smelled like mold. I didn't ask anyone for help. So forgive me if I'm not rushing to hand over cash now that the tables turned. Her voice softened. Ryan, it wasn't my decision. I didn't even know she used your fund. That was a lie, or maybe a half-truth, the kind she'd always used when guilt crept in. Mom told me you cried tears of joy the day she gave you the keys, I said quietly. Ryan, that's not fair. No, I said, it's finally fair. I hung up before she could reply. For the next few weeks, things went eerily silent. No calls from Claire. No messages from Mom. Not even a passive-aggressive voicemail. I thought maybe, just maybe, I'd finally drawn a line they wouldn't cross. I was wrong. One Tuesday morning, I woke up to a storm of notifications. Missed calls, texts, emails. I thought something terrible had happened. In a way, it had. My business account had been flagged for unauthorized access. Someone had tried to log in from a device linked to an email with my mother's name. I couldn't believe it at first. I checked twice. The recovery contact number on the attempted login request matched hers. It took me a full hour to process what that meant. She'd actually tried to access my company account. Maybe she thought she could help manage my money. Maybe she wanted to see how much I really had. Maybe she didn't believe I was as successful as I said I was. Whatever her reason, it was a violation that left me shaking. I confronted her that night. Mom, I said, voice low, controlled. Why did you try to log into my business account? I didn't, she said immediately. What are you talking about? I got the security alert. It was your email. Your number. Her tone sharpened. I don't know what you're accusing me of, but I don't appreciate the tone, Ryan. I clenched my jaw. You're lying. Watch your mouth, she snapped. I was just checking on things. You've been avoiding us, and I was worried something was wrong. I thought maybe you'd gotten hacked. I laughed bitterly. You tried to hack me yourself. How dare you? She said, indignant now. After everything I've done for you. You're so ungrateful. I raised you, fed you, kept a roof over your head. Then you stole my college fund, tried to destroy my reputation, and now you're breaking into my business. I interrupted. So yeah, I guess we're even. There was silence. Then, in the smallest, most cutting voice she could manage, she said, You've really changed, Ryan. You used to care about family. And that was it. That one sentence, that guilt-drenched dagger, broke something in me. I didn't yell. I didn't argue. I just said, good, and hung up. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat in my office, the glow of my computer the only light in the room, thinking about how far things had fallen. My mom, my own mother, had crossed a line I didn't think she ever would. For the first time in years, I felt small again. Like the kid sitting on the porch at sunrise after losing his college fund. Except this time, I wasn't naive. I knew exactly what she was doing. She was trying to drag me back down. Because people like her, people who feed off control, can't stand watching someone they underestimated rise without them. The next morning, I decided to disappear for a while. Not literally. I didn't pack up and leave town. But I withdrew. I stopped answering calls, stopped posting online, stopped showing up at family events. I poured everything into work. If my mom wanted to see me fail, I'd make sure she had to squint from the bottom of the mountain to even recognize me. But isolation comes with its own kind of loneliness. I'd built walls so high that sometimes I couldn't even see the horizon. I'd wake up, code for 16 hours straight, eat cold takeout, then crash at my desk. I told myself it was progress, but deep down, I knew I was hiding. One night, months later, I got an email from an old friend, Evan, the guy who'd been my first hire when my company started. We hadn't talked in a while, not since he'd moved to another city to work at a tech firm. Hey man, he wrote. Saw your name mentioned in a business article today. Congrats on the new contracts. You're killing it. We should catch up sometime. For a long moment, I just stared at the message. Killing it. I didn't feel like it. I felt empty. That's when it hit me. My mom had taken years of my confidence, but she hadn't taken my drive. I'd let her occupy too much space in my head. I'd built my whole success around proving her wrong. But I didn't want to live my life in opposition anymore. I wanted to live it for myself. That realization was small but powerful, like the first crack of light through a locked window. So I started making quiet changes. I reached out to a few old friends I'd pushed away, started mentoring a couple of young programmers, got back into running, began sketching out plans for something bigger, a project that wasn't just about money, but meaning. Something mine, untouched by family drama. I didn't tell anyone what I was doing, not even Claire, especially not Mom. But of course, silence only made them more curious. One evening, my phone buzzed again. This time, it was Claire. Mom's been asking about you, she said. She thinks you're avoiding her. I am. She sighed. You know she doesn't mean to hurt you, right? She just doesn't know how to show love the way you want. I almost laughed. Breaking into my bank account isn't love, Claire. I know, she said quietly. I'm not defending her. But she's been different lately. More paranoid. She keeps saying she thinks you're hiding something. She's right, I said. There was a long pause. Ryan, what are you planning? Nothing, I said. Just working. But that wasn't the truth. Because in the back of my mind, something was already forming. An idea, a moment, a reckoning. Not revenge, exactly. Not yet. But something close. I wanted them to see me the way they never had before. Not the realistic one. Not the disappointment. Not the safety net. The next time they saw me, I wanted it to be impossible to ignore. And as the first outlines of that plan took shape, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Calm. Because for the first time in my life, I wasn't reacting to their chaos. I was creating my own destiny. And somewhere deep down, I knew the day would come when I'd invite them back into my world, just long enough for them to realize what they'd thrown away. That day was closer than I thought. The shift didn't happen overnight. There was no lightning strike moment, no dramatic montage of me suddenly becoming unstoppable. It was slower, quieter, like the slow dawn that you don't notice until the light has already filled the room. For months, I kept my head down and built. I was still running my company, but now it had evolved into something bigger than I'd ever imagined. What started as a small software tool had become a full-fledged platform, a scalable service used by dozens of mid-sized businesses across multiple industries. I'd assembled a small but loyal team, developers, designers, and one brilliant operations manager named Mia, who joined when I could finally afford to pay real salaries. We worked out of a cramped co-working space downtown at first, surrounded by startups that were mostly dreams on napkins. Ours wasn't glamorous either, but we had something they didn't: traction. Our users weren't hypothetical. They were real companies paying real money. Every new client meant validation. Every positive review meant momentum. The thing that drove me hardest, though, wasn't the money. It was that, for the first time in my life, I was building something that worked. Every problem had a solution. Every setback had a way forward. My company became my redemption arc, the thing that made all those years of being underestimated finally make sense. But success doesn't stay small for long. By my late 20s, our product was being noticed by investors. I still remember sitting in that glass-walled office during our first big funding meeting, wearing a borrowed suit that didn't quite fit, surrounded by people twice my age and 5 times my net worth. So, one of them said, leaning back in his chair, "You're telling me this entire system was coded by you personally in the first version?" "Yeah," I said. "I built it in my apartment." He raised his eyebrows. "And now you're managing 6 developers?" "7, I corrected with a small smile. "We just hired another." When we left that meeting, I expected nothing. But a week later, we got the call: $1.2 million in seed funding. I remember sitting alone in my car afterward, staring at my hands on the steering wheel. I wasn't excited at first. I was just quiet. Because in that moment, I realized something simple and terrifying. Every limitation I'd ever believed about myself came from her voice, not mine. And I'd finally outgrown it. That night, I opened a blank document and started writing goals. Not small ones, big ones. I wasn't just building a business anymore. I was building a legacy. Within 2 years, we expanded into 2 offices, one downtown, one in another state. Our client list tripled. Industry magazines started mentioning our name. I was invited to speak on panels, asked to consult on projects I used to dream about. And through all of it, I said nothing to my family. Not because I wanted to be petty, though maybe, deep down, there was a small part of me that enjoyed the silence, but because I wanted my success to speak for itself. I wanted the reveal to come when they least expected it, in a way that would leave no room for excuses or denial. During those years, I barely saw Claire or Mom. Occasionally, I'd get updates through distant relatives. "Your sister bought another house. Your mom's hosting some charity event." They were asking about you. Asking about me. That phrase always made me smirk. They weren't asking out of love. They were asking out of curiosity or fear. They could sense something shifting, even if they didn't know what it was. Then one day, fate threw me a strange kind of test. I was attending a business conference out of town. It was one of those polished corporate gatherings with badges, networking tables, and lukewarm coffee. I'd just finished speaking on a panel when someone approached me, smiling like they recognized me. "Ryan Carter, right?" he said, shaking my hand. "I'm Eric. Eric Lawrence." The name hit me before the face did. Claire's fiancé. He looked a little older, a little more tired than I remembered from those Facebook photos Mom used to post. The ones where they both looked like they'd won the genetic lottery. "I didn't know you were in tech," he said, feigning casual surprise. I smiled politely. "I didn't know you went to these conferences." He chuckled. "Just trying to stay relevant. I heard about your company, by the way. You're the guy behind Synthra Systems, right?" I nodded slowly. "That's me." His tone shifted, friendly, but cautious. "You've made quite a name for yourself. I had no idea you were doing so well." "Neither did my family," I said evenly. He hesitated, then offered an awkward smile. "You know, Claire talks about you sometimes." "Does she?" "She feels bad, you know," he said, lowering his voice. "About how things went down with the college fund. And your mom, she didn't mean to." "She meant every word," I interrupted. "She just didn't expect me to prove her wrong." Eric looked uncomfortable, shifting on his feet. "Well, she's proud of you now." "Funny," I said. "She hasn't told me that herself." He gave a half-hearted laugh, mumbled something about catching another panel, and walked away. That night, in my hotel room, I couldn't stop thinking about that line. "She's proud of you now." Proud of what? Proud that I'd succeeded without her? Proud that her narrative had collapsed? Or was it just another line? Something she said to make herself feel better about what she'd done? Either way, it didn't matter. I wasn't chasing her approval anymore. A year later, my company hit 8 figures in valuation. We opened a new headquarters, a penthouse office overlooking the city skyline. I moved into the same building, top floor. It wasn't about showing off. It was about proximity. I wanted to wake up every morning and see what I'd built. The irony wasn't lost on me. The kid who was too unrealistic for college now owned more property than his mom and sister combined. But even then, I didn't reach out. I didn't gloat. I just worked. Mia, my operations manager, noticed the shift in me. One night after a late strategy meeting, she said, "You're different lately. Calmer. Like you already know how this story ends." I smiled. "Maybe I do." "Does it involve your family?" she asked gently. I paused. "Eventually." She nodded. "When you're ready." I was. But before I could make my move, fate delivered one more twist, the kind of poetic coincidence that almost felt scripted. It was a Friday morning when my phone rang. Unknown number. Normally, I'd ignore it, but something made me answer. "Ryan? It's Claire." Her voice trembled slightly. "Mom's in the hospital." I sat back, silent. She collapsed at her charity event. They said it was exhaustion, maybe stress-related. "She's okay, but you should probably come." I hesitated for a long moment before saying, "I'll think about it." "Ryan, please," she said. "She's been asking for you." I almost laughed. "Now she wants me around?" "Don't do this," Claire said softly. "Whatever happened, she's still our mom." Our mom. The phrase didn't land the way it used to. I said I'd see what I could do and hung up. That night, I went anyway. Not for her, but for closure. When I walked into that hospital room, she looked smaller than I remembered. Weaker. Her hair was grayer, her skin thinner, but her eyes, those sharp, assessing eyes, hadn't changed. "Ryan," she said softly. "You came." I nodded, standing by the door. "You look better than I expected." She smiled faintly. "You always had a sarcastic streak." I didn't respond. "I heard you've done well for yourself," she said finally. "Your sister told me. I'm proud of you." There it was. The sentence I'd wanted to hear since I was a teenager. And now that it was in the air, it felt hollow. Empty. Too late. "I didn't do it for you," I said quietly. She sighed. "You still hold grudges, don't you?" "I hold memories," I corrected. We sat in silence for a while. She kept trying to steer the conversation toward small talk, but I wasn't interested. Every word between us felt like a negotiation for emotional ground. When I left that night, I didn't say goodbye. I just said, "Take care of yourself." But as I walked down the sterile hallway, something unexpected stirred inside me. Not pity, not forgiveness, but a sense of completion. Like a story was quietly reaching its turning point. Because the next time she saw me, it wouldn't be in a hospital room. It would be at a celebration, one she'd never forget. And for the first time in my life, I'd be the one setting the stage. When Mom was discharged from the hospital, the old rhythm of our family started to creep back. Calls, texts, invitations to catch up. But something had changed, and it wasn't just me. I wasn't that ignored kid anymore. I wasn't even just her son. By that point, I was a man who ran a multi-million-dollar company, one with contracts, investors, and enough influence to make people like her pause before talking down to me. At least, that's what I thought. The first time I saw her again after the hospital, she invited me to brunch at Claire's place. "Just family," she'd said, "like old times." Against my better judgment, I went, part curiosity, part strategy. I wanted to see what game she was playing now. The moment I walked through the door, I realized nothing had changed at all. Claire's house, her second, apparently, looked like something out of a real estate magazine. Polished white floors, designer furniture, the kind of chandelier that exists purely to scream, "We have money." Mom was sitting on the sofa, sipping coffee like royalty, and Claire was in the kitchen, organizing pastries into perfect rows. "Ryan," Mom said brightly, standing to hug me like nothing had ever happened. "You look wonderful. Don't you think he looks good, Claire?" Claire smiled faintly. "Yeah, different. More polished." "Success suits you," Mom added, in that backhanded way she did. "I'm glad you're finally finding your place." I smiled. "Took a while, but yeah, things are good." They exchanged a look. That same old "we'll see how long that lasts" glance I knew too well. Mom started asking questions about my work, pretending to be interested. "What exactly is it you do again?" "You build apps." I kept my tone even. "We design enterprise software systems for logistics and automation. Mostly large-scale companies now." Oh, she said, clearly not understanding a word but pretending to. And people pay you for that? I almost laughed. Yeah, Mom. They pay me for that. Claire leaned in. You must be doing pretty well then. I could feel where this was going. I manage, I said. We're expanding, but I try to stay grounded. Mom smiled tightly. That's good. You always were a dreamer, Ryan. I just hope you're being careful. You remember what happened with your cousin. He invested too quickly and lost everything. I nodded slowly. Yeah, I remember. They kept talking, mostly about themselves, of course, while I watched. Every comment, every tone shift, every calculated smile reminded me why I'd spent years avoiding this. But it wasn't just bitterness anymore. It was analysis, observation. They still saw me as that boy sitting in his room, tinkering with computers, living on hope and cheap instant noodles. They didn't realize that while they'd been polishing appearances, I'd been quietly building leverage. And that leverage was about to pay off. 2 weeks after that brunch, my company landed its biggest contract yet, a deal with a national firm that would double our revenue in under a year. Investors were ecstatic. We'd gone from a small startup to a legitimate player in the industry. We even had an offer from a larger company looking to acquire us. That deal, if it went through, would change everything. One evening, I was going through paperwork in my office when Mia knocked on my door. You've got visitors, she said, looking hesitant. Who? She smiled faintly. A woman who says she's your mother and another who looks like her. I exhaled. Perfect timing. They walked in like they owned the place. Mom looked around the office, all glass and skyline views, and gave a low whistle. This is where you work. I nodded. And live. You live here? She asked, almost scandalized. The penthouse upstairs. It's convenient. Claire grinned. Wow, fancy. You always were dramatic. Mom gave her a look. Be polite. Then to me, she said, this is impressive, Ryan. I had no idea you'd done so well for yourself. That's because you never asked, I said evenly. She ignored that. So tell me, do you own this company outright? I raised an eyebrow. Why? She smiled sweetly. Just curious. I mean, you must have partners or investors or something. You can't do all this alone. I leaned back in my chair. Mostly alone. I have investors now, but I own the majority. Her eyes lit up. That was the moment I knew exactly why she'd shown up. It wasn't about family or pride or reconciliation. It was about opportunity. That's incredible, she said softly. I'm proud of you, honey. Truly. You've built something amazing. I stared at her. What do you want, Mom? The mask slipped just slightly. Can't I just visit my son? Not without a reason. She hesitated, then sighed. Your sister and Eric are going through some financial troubles again. The housing market hasn't been kind. I thought maybe. There it is, I said quietly. Claire looked embarrassed. Mom, maybe we should. No, I interrupted. Let her finish. Mom's voice grew firmer. You have more than enough, Ryan. Family helps family. We've always believed that. I laughed. No, you believed that when I was the one being drained. When I needed help, you called it a lesson in humility. Don't twist things, she said sharply. We made sacrifices for you. You made choices, I corrected. Ones that benefited Claire. Let's not rewrite history. She gave me a long, cold look. The same look she used to give me when I was a kid caught talking back. But I wasn't a kid anymore. I stood. This meeting's over. Ryan, Claire said quietly, please. It's just temporary. We'll pay you back. I turned to her. You won't. You never do. Mom frowned. You've really become bitter, haven't you? No, I said, stepping closer. I've just stopped letting people take advantage of me. They left soon after, offended and whispering under their breath. But before Mom walked out the door, she turned and said, you'll regret this. Money doesn't last forever. I smiled. Neither does control. After they were gone, Mia poked her head in again. You okay? I nodded slowly. Better than ever. That night, I stayed late, watching the city lights reflect against the glass. Their visit had confirmed what I already knew. They still thought I was beneath them emotionally, even if I'd surpassed them financially. They would never respect me because respect requires humility, and neither of them had ever learned it. But that's when I realized something even more powerful. I didn't need their respect. What I needed was a moment. The perfect, poetic moment that would make every be realistic echo in their heads forever. The opportunity came sooner than expected. A few months later, our acquisition deal was finalized. The number was staggering, 9 figures. I retained a stake in a leadership position. Overnight, I went from a founder running a startup to the CEO of a subsidiary under a major conglomerate. My name was suddenly on press releases, business articles, interviews. For the first time, the world knew who I was, and by extension, so did my family. The texts started rolling in again. "So proud of you, sweetheart. We always knew you had it in you. Your sister told me about the news. Can we celebrate?" I didn't respond to a single one. Not yet, because I had something bigger in mind. One evening, as I stood on the balcony of my penthouse, glass of whiskey in hand, looking down at the glowing city, an idea came to me, not out of anger, but out of clarity. A company event, a grand celebration for the acquisition. Investors, clients, press, the whole high-profile crowd. And maybe, just maybe, I'd extend 2 very specific invitations. The kind printed on thick ivory paper. The kind you can't ignore. I smiled to myself as I envisioned it. My mother, walking through the doors of the building she once told me I'd never belong in. My sister, realizing she was standing inside the penthouse her mother's less successful son owned. It wouldn't be revenge through humiliation or cruelty. It would be revenge through truth. A living, breathing contradiction of everything they'd ever believed about me. I finished my drink, set the glass down, and whispered to no one in particular. "Let's make this unforgettable." The invitations went out 2 weeks later. Gold embossed, sealed in thick envelopes, hand-delivered by courier. I made sure the text was simple, elegant, and impossible to misinterpret. "You are cordially invited to the Synthra Systems acquisition celebration. Hosted by founder and CEO, Ryan Carter. Penthouse level, Skyline Tower. Friday, 7 p.m. I sent one to Claire's address, one to my mother's. And then, I waited. The night of the event, the penthouse gleamed. The entire top floor had been transformed. White marble floors, champagne stations, a panoramic view of the city glittering below. A string quartet played softly near the balcony, and servers in black suits circulated with trays of hors d'oeuvres. It wasn't just a party. It was a statement. As guests arrived, investors, executives, journalists, I greeted them one by one. Smiles, handshakes, flashes of cameras. My PR director whispered that the local news was doing a feature on self-made entrepreneurs. I nodded, half listening. I wasn't focused on the press. I was waiting for them. At exactly 7:42 p.m., the elevator doors opened, and there they were. My mother, in a sparkling silver dress, her arm hooked through Claire's. Both of them paused at the entrance, taking in the room. Mom's eyes widened as she saw the view. The same skyline she used to tell me was for people who live in the real world. Now, she was standing in the middle of it. Claire looked nervous, glancing around. She spotted me across the room and gave a tentative wave. I smiled. "You made it." "Of course," Mom said, walking toward me. "We wouldn't miss it for the world." Her voice carried that practiced grace, the same tone she used when trying to impress strangers. She leaned in to kiss my cheek. "This is incredible, Ryan. Truly. I had no idea it would be so extravagant. I wanted to celebrate properly," I said. "After all, it's been a long journey." "Oh, I can imagine," she said, scanning the crowd. "And you've done so well for yourself." I was just telling Claire, it must have been all that discipline I taught you growing up. I chuckled. Something like that. For a while, I let them mingle. I wanted them to feel comfortable, surrounded by the very world they'd once told me was out of reach. I watched as Mom chatted animatedly with investors, pretending she understood their business jargon, laughing too loudly at jokes she didn't get. Claire stayed quieter, sipping champagne and looking at the city through the glass walls. Every so often, her gaze drifted toward me, half admiration, half guilt. When the speeches began, I took the stage. The room fell silent as the lights dimmed slightly, leaving only the glow of the skyline behind me. I adjusted the microphone, my reflection faintly visible in the glass. "Thank you all for coming tonight," I began. "It means a lot to have so many incredible people here, colleagues, partners, friends, celebrating what we've built together." There was polite applause. I continued, my tone calm, deliberate. "For those who don't know, Synthra Systems started in a one-room apartment. No investors, no safety net, just an old laptop, a coffee maker, and an idea." I paused, scanning the room until my gaze met my mother's. I was told, once, that I needed to be realistic. That some people are meant to chase dreams, and others are meant to accept limits. That success wasn't for everyone. A faint murmur rippled through the crowd. My mother's smile froze. I went on. I believed that for a long time. I believed that maybe I wasn't meant to build anything lasting. But then I realized, the only limits that matter are the ones you accept. There was a beat of silence. Then applause, warm, genuine. Cameras flashed. I smiled, letting it fade slowly as my gaze lingered on her. So tonight isn't just a celebration of business success. It's a reminder, for anyone who's ever been told they're not good enough, that no one else defines your worth. I stepped back, nodded to the host, and the music swelled again. Mom didn't clap. She just stared, her expression tight, her eyes sharp like glass under pressure. Claire looked down, shame flickering across her face. After the speech, I moved through the crowd, shaking hands, answering questions, laughing where appropriate. But my attention was still on them. Mom eventually found me again near the bar. Her smile was brittle. That speech, she said softly, was pointed. I met her eyes. Was it? You didn't need to make things sound so personal. They were personal. She straightened her shoulders. You think humiliating me in front of strangers makes you powerful? I took a sip of champagne, then set the glass down. No, I think finally telling the truth does. Her lips tightened. You've really changed, Ryan. Good, I said. That was the point. For the first time that night, she didn't have a comeback. She turned away, searching for Claire, who was standing near the balcony. I followed them quietly. Claire's voice was low but heated. He's right, Mom. You treated him like garbage for years. Watch your tone, Mom hissed. You think you're any better? You both would be nowhere without me. Claire laughed bitterly. Without you? You used his college fund for my house. Their voices were starting to draw attention. A few guests turned to look. I stepped forward. Ladies, let's not make a scene. Mom glared at me. You wanted a scene. Don't act innocent now. I smiled slightly. You're right. I did. She froze. What? I gestured toward the glass wall overlooking the skyline. You see that building across the street? She turned. The logo of my company's new parent corporation glowed from the tower, 20 stories high. I own that view, I said quietly. The company, the contracts, the partnerships, everything you said I'd never have, it's all right there. For a long moment, she didn't say anything. Then, almost in a whisper, she said, You planned this. Every second. Her face went pale. Claire stood silently beside her, torn between guilt and awe. Mom opened her mouth, then closed it. The words wouldn't come. For once, she had nothing to say. I stepped closer, keeping my voice low enough that only she could hear. You told me to be realistic. So I was. I stopped expecting you to love me for who I was, and started loving the version of me you couldn't see. She blinked hard, like she might cry, but her pride wouldn't let her. She just turned away and walked toward the elevator, chin trembling, clutching her bag like a lifeline. Claire stayed behind. She'll never admit it, she said quietly, but you broke her tonight. I looked at her. I didn't break her. I showed her the mirror she's been avoiding. Claire nodded slowly. She'll hate you for it. Maybe, I said, but she'll remember it. Claire gave a small, sad smile. I'm sorry for everything, Ryan. For not standing up for you back then. I should have said something. I looked at her for a long moment. You still can, but not with words. She nodded, and for the first time in years, we hugged. No theatrics, no awkward apologies, just quiet understanding. When the night ended and the last guests left, I stood by the window, watching the city lights flicker. Somewhere out there, I knew my mother was sitting in silence, replaying every word, every moment, every time she told me to aim lower. And maybe, just maybe, she was realizing what it felt like to be wrong. I didn't feel angry anymore. I didn't even feel triumphant. Just at peace. Revenge hadn't been about humiliation. It had been about reclaiming the story, about showing her, and myself, that I'd never needed her permission to become more than what she imagined. As the lights of the city reflected in the glass, I lifted my glass one final time, a quiet toast to no one in particular. To being realistic, I said softly. Just not the way she meant. And for the first time in my life, the words didn't hurt. They felt like freedom. I'll never forget the sound of my mom's voice when she told me, We're not doing anything for your birthday this year. It wouldn't be fair to your brother. Just like that. No apology. No explanation that made sense. No offer to make it up to me later. I just stood there in the kitchen, holding the edge of the counter like it would stop my stomach from dropping, trying not to show how much it stung. She didn't even look up from the grocery list she was writing. Like what she'd just said wasn't a gut punch. Like it was obvious. Reasonable, even. My name's Sam. I was 18 at the time, and up until that moment, I hadn't fully realized just how invisible I'd become in my own family. Growing up, I always knew my brother, Tyler, was the favorite. He's 2 years younger than me, but somehow always managed to act like the older one. Not because he was more mature. God, no. Tyler threw tantrums well into high school and had a way of making everything about him, no matter how unrelated. If I came home with a certificate from school, he'd start fake crying because he didn't get one. If I got sick and had to stay home, he'd pretend to have a fever the next day too. And my parents? They always bought it. They'd coddle him, comfort him, and tell me I needed to stop showing off or be more understanding. I spent years swallowing it, thinking that maybe if I just tried harder, if I was quieter, more helpful, less me, they'd see I wasn't the problem. But that birthday, that was the moment everything finally cracked. I'd been looking forward to my 18th birthday like it was a finish line. I told myself that once I was legally an adult, things would change. I'd apply for scholarships, get into college, get a job, save up, maybe even move out. I just had to make it to 18. It was the one thing I clung to during the constant arguments, the suffocating tension in our house, the way Tyler would push every button he could and somehow still walk away the victim. I didn't want a party or gifts. I just wanted to feel like I mattered for once. But 2 weeks before the day, I started noticing the signs. No one mentioned it. No one asked what I wanted to do. My dad mumbled something about tight finances, even though Tyler had just gotten brand new headphones and a gaming chair delivered that week. When I brought it up casually, like, hey, are we doing anything for my birthday? My mom gave me that strained smile she used when she didn't want to argue. We'll see, she said, which I already knew meant no. The final blow came the night before. I was sitting at the dinner table, pushing some overcooked spaghetti around my plate, when my mom dropped the bomb. We're not doing anything for your birthday this year, she said, not even glancing up. It would upset Tyler. I remember blinking, genuinely confused. Upset him how? I asked. Tyler, who was scrolling on his phone next to me, didn't even pretend to be surprised. Because he's been feeling left out lately, my mom continued. And we don't want to rub anything in his face. Rub what in his face? That I existed? That I made it to adulthood despite them trying to snuff me out with indifference? I looked at my dad, hoping, just hoping, he might step in, might say something. But he kept chewing like this was all completely normal. That was when Tyler finally looked up and said, with a smug little smirk, "No one wants you here anyway. Just leave." He said it like it was a joke, like he expected everyone to laugh. No one did. Not because it was cruel, but because it was true to them. My mom sighed. "Tyler," she said gently, not in reprimand, but in that sing-song voice she used when he was being playful. My dad said nothing. I felt my throat tighten, but I didn't give them the satisfaction of a reaction. I just nodded, pushed my plate away, and went upstairs. I packed that night. I didn't slam doors. I didn't leave a note. I just filled my backpack with the essentials, my laptop, some clothes, the crumpled $80 I had saved from tutoring, and walked out just after midnight while the house was asleep. No one called. No one texted. It was like they'd been waiting for me to disappear. I couch surfed for a bit. Friends from school, people who barely knew me but saw how bad things were and offered anyway. Eventually, I scraped together enough to rent a shoebox of a studio apartment across town. It was barely livable. Creaky floorboards, drafty windows, a radiator that hissed like a demon in the night, but it was mine. For the first time, I didn't feel like I had to tiptoe around someone else's mood or apologize for existing. I started working part-time at a coffee shop and took online classes whenever I could. It wasn't easy, but it was freedom. I didn't tell anyone where I went. Not my parents. Not even extended family. I figured they'd ask eventually. They didn't. A part of me hoped someone would reach out just to check if I was alive. No one did. I blocked my mom and Tyler on everything, kept my address off social media, and changed my number. It was like cutting off a tumor. Painful at first, but necessary to survive. I told myself I was done with them, that I could move on. And for a while I did. Until a year later, almost to the day, I opened my front door to find Tyler standing there. Disheveled. Red-eyed. Crying. Screaming. saying I'd stolen the life that was meant for him. And just like that, everything I thought I'd escaped came roaring back. I froze. For a second, I genuinely thought I was hallucinating. Tyler, my brother, was standing in the hallway of my apartment building like some ghost from a past life I'd worked so hard to bury. His hair was a mess, his face blotchy from crying, hoodie half-zipped like he'd thrown it on without thinking. He looked wrecked. But what stuck with me most, what sent a chill down my spine, was the look in his eyes. It wasn't guilt. It was rage. "I've been looking for you for months," he yelled, stepping forward before I could even decide whether to shut the door in his face. "You think you can just run away? Just disappear?" Like none of it mattered. I snapped out of my daze and put a hand against the door frame to block him. "What are you doing here, Tyler? How did you even find me?" He scoffed, brushing tears off his cheeks in the most dramatic, performative way possible. "You think you're better than us now, huh? Living here like some kind of martyr? You don't get to just vanish and leave me with them." His voice cracked on the last word, and I saw something shift in his face. He wasn't just angry. He was panicking, spiraling. I didn't answer right away. My heart was hammering in my chest, not from fear, although part of me was afraid, but from the sheer absurdity of this moment. This was the same brother who told me to leave. The same one who smirked while my parents canceled my birthday. The same one who watched me pack my things and never once tried to stop me. "Tyler," I said slowly, "you told me no one wanted me there. And guess what? You were right. No one came looking. Not once." He flinched like I slapped him. "Because you left," he snapped. "You abandoned us." I laughed, dry, humorless. "I abandoned you. I was a ghost in that house for years, and you're mad I finally stopped haunting it." He pushed past me before I could stop him. I wasn't strong enough to hold the door shut against his weight, and honestly, I was too stunned to resist. He stumbled into my tiny apartment like he owned the place, spinning in circles like he couldn't believe where he was. "This is it," he spat. "This little box. This is the life you chose over us." I closed the door behind him, exhaling slowly. "I didn't choose this over you. I chose me over being your scapegoat." He turned on me, and that's when the full meltdown began. "You stole everything from me, Sam," he screamed, chest heaving. "The future, the attention, the respect. They used to care about me. Then you left, and everything went to crap. Mom cries all the time now. Dad barely talks. And me? I get blamed for everything." I blinked. "Blamed for what exactly?" "For you leaving," he shouted. "For the way the house feels empty. For the stupid tension all the time. Do you know what it's like to live in a house where your name is basically a curse? Every time Mom sighs, it's 'I wish Sam was here.' Every time I mess up, it's 'Why can't you be more like your brother?' That stopped me cold. Because no matter how much I hated how they treated me, I never expected that." Tyler dropped onto the couch, my lumpy, second-hand, Craigslist couch, and put his head in his hands. "I didn't mean it when I told you to leave," he mumbled. I was jealous, okay? You were always the smart one, the responsible one. Even when they treated you like crap, you still had your stuff together. And me? I was just the mess. I didn't know what to say. I should have felt vindicated. I should have been angry. Instead, I just felt hollow. I sat down on the other side of the room, keeping a good few feet of space between us. "You could have talked to me, Tyler. All those years, you let them pit us against each other. And you loved it. You didn't just benefit, you fed off it. You enjoyed watching me struggle. So don't come here crying about how hard it is now that the golden pedestal is gone." He shook his head, biting his lip like he was trying not to cry again. "You don't get it. After you left, they started saying my birthday wasn't appropriate to celebrate either. Said it was too soon. Said it would feel insensitive. I didn't even get a cake." I blinked, unsure if I should laugh or scream. "So now you know how it feels. And that's why you're here? Because suddenly you're not the center of attention anymore." "No," he shouted, eyes wide. "I'm here because I want things back the way they were." I stood up. "That's never going to happen," I said, ice in my voice now. "And honestly, if you came here expecting me to feel sorry for you, you're wasting your time." His eyes scanned the room again. "You have your own place, your own job, your own life. You don't get to act like you're the victim anymore." I took a step forward, barely containing the storm that had been brewing in my chest for the past year. "You think this life was handed to me? That I just walked out the door and the universe said, 'Congrats, here's your fresh start'? I bled for this. I starved for this. I cried myself to sleep more nights than I can count. But I kept going because I knew I deserved better than that house. Then you. His mouth opened, closed. He looked like he wanted to argue, but the fight was draining out of him. And then, almost like a final Hail Mary, he reached into his hoodie pocket and pulled out a letter. Crumpled, torn at one corner. He threw it at me like it was a grenade. I caught it. What is this? Read it, he said. You'll see. I unfolded the letter with trembling fingers. It was from our parents. Addressed to me. Written 6 months after I left. And never sent. My mom's handwriting filled the page. Tight and messy, like she was writing through tears. It was an apology. Or something that tried to sound like one. We miss you. We didn't realize how much you meant to the family until you were gone. Tyler is struggling. We're all struggling. Please come home. It wasn't enough. Not even close. But it was something. And they never sent it. I looked up at Tyler, my hands shaking. Why didn't they send this? He stared at the floor. Because I didn't let them. Time stopped. What? I found it on the counter. Mom was sealing the envelope. And I lost it. I told them not to send it. That you didn't deserve it. That you'd rub it in their face. That it would make things worse. My throat went dry. So they listened to you. He nodded. They always did. I dropped the letter. That was it. That was the moment, the breaking point. All those years of playing second fiddle, of being dismissed and discarded and made to feel small. And even after I left, Tyler found a way to take the one thing that could have changed everything and bury it. And now he wanted what exactly? Forgiveness? Redemption? A do-over? I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. The apartment felt smaller than ever, like the walls were closing in. And Tyler, my brother, my childhood enemy in every sense but name, was staring at me with wet eyes and trembling lips like he was the one who'd been wronged. But before I could speak, before I could say anything, he muttered something under his breath that shattered what little restraint I had left. I should have been the one to leave. I narrowed my eyes. What? He looked up, face twisted with something dark. You don't get it, Sam. That life, it was supposed to be mine. The job, the apartment, the respect. Mom and Dad used to say it, even when we were kids. You'll do big things, Tyler. You're special. You're the one we believe in. I stood completely still. And when you left, he continued, voice trembling. They stopped saying it. They started talking about you. They were angry. Yeah, but they couldn't stop comparing me to you. Even after everything. Even when I begged them not to. He looked up at me, eyes blazing now. You stole that from me. And just like that, the dam burst. I took one long step forward and looked him dead in the eye. You want the truth, Tyler? I said, my voice low and steady. You didn't lose their respect because of me. You lost it because you spent your whole life expecting the world to hand you things just because people said you were special. But I earned everything I have. You're not jealous of what I stole. You're jealous that I survived without needing you. Without needing them. Tyler's lip quivered. I expected him to lash out again. But instead, he stood up, walked to the door slowly, and turned back with a look I'll never forget. This isn't over, he whispered. You don't get to erase me that easily. Then he walked out, and I just stood there shaking. Because deep down, I knew he wasn't wrong. It wasn't over. Not yet. After the door slammed shut, I didn't move for a long time. I stood in the middle of my studio, the silence pressing in around me like a weight. The letter still lay on the floor where I'd dropped it. The corners curled, the ink slightly smudged, proof that at some point, my mom had cried over it. Maybe even regretted what happened. But Tyler, he'd intercepted that sliver of humanity and made sure I never saw it. Until now. And not because he'd had a change of heart, but because his own life was unraveling and he needed someone to blame. That realization, that I might have gone back if they'd sent the letter, hit me like a freight train. It's strange how grief sneaks up on you, even when you think you've already buried the dead. I thought I'd mourned my family. I thought I'd made peace with their absence. But that night, I cried harder than I had in a year. I wasn't just mourning what they did. I was mourning what could have been. The version of reality where my parents had come to their senses, where Tyler had grown up instead of doubling down, where we'd sat down at the same table and tried to rebuild something broken. That version didn't exist. It never did. But letting go of the idea hurt more than I expected. I spent the next week in a fog. I stopped showing up to my shifts at the coffee shop, which nearly got me fired. I missed 2 online class deadlines. My manager pulled me aside one night and said, "You look like you're halfway buried, kid. You okay?" I wasn't. But I didn't know how to say that without sounding crazy. How do you explain to someone that your brother stormed into your apartment like a rejected villain and confessed to sabotaging the one olive branch your parents ever offered? You don't. So I just nodded and said I was tired. Which wasn't even a lie. I'd hit rock bottom. Not the kind where you're homeless or bankrupt or physically broken, but the kind where you look in the mirror and realize you've been surviving, not living. That your whole life has been about getting away from something, not going towards something. I was 19, in a windowless studio with water stains on the ceiling and a secondhand mattress that smelled like regret. I had no family, no safety net, and no roadmap. Just me. And for a while, that scared me. But slowly, quietly, something shifted. It started with a job listing. A girl from my online class group chat, someone I'd only talked to a handful of times, posted about a nonprofit in need of part-time assistance. Data entry, mostly, with some admin stuff. The pay was better than the coffee shop, and it came with actual experience that could go on a resume. I almost didn't apply. I didn't think I had a chance. But I did. They hired me after a Zoom interview where I thought I bombed every question. Apparently, they liked my honesty. I told them I didn't have much professional experience, but I'd been handling difficult people my whole life, and I could stay calm under pressure. They laughed. I didn't tell them I was talking about my family. The work was straightforward, but the environment was a revelation. The people were kind, respectful. My supervisor actually asked for my opinion during meetings. For the first time in my life, I felt like my voice had weight. It was the smallest thing, but to me, it felt like gold. I started taking pride in my job. I showed up early, asked questions, even helped streamline a filing system that was driving everyone nuts. They noticed. A month later, they offered me more hours. 2 months after that, they asked me if I'd consider staying on full-time after I finished school. Me, the kid who packed his bags and walked out of a house where he didn't even get a birthday. It wasn't just the job. Other things started falling into place, too. I took a risk and submitted a personal essay to an online magazine, writing about estrangement, family guilt, and the strange grief of being cut off by choice. They published it. It didn't go viral or anything, but I got emails. Dozens. People saying they saw themselves in my words. That they were trying to break free from toxic homes too. That it helped them feel less alone. I wasn't alone anymore either. That same girl from the group chat, the one who posted the job listing, we started talking more. Then hanging out. Then one night, after a long walk and 2 hours of just sitting on a bench talking about our childhoods, she reached out and held my hand. Her name was Alina. She didn't ask for the whole story right away. She let me unravel in pieces, never pushing, never judging. When I finally told her everything, about Tyler, the birthday, the letter, she just looked at me and said, "That's not a family. That's a crime scene." We both laughed until we cried. By the time winter rolled around again, I had savings in the bank, a new laptop, better furniture, and my first real sense of peace. I even treated myself to a birthday dinner. Just me, Alina, and a few friends from work. It was nothing fancy. We ordered takeout and played card games until midnight. But when they surprised me with a homemade cake, candles and all, I felt something crack open in my chest. I hadn't realized how much I needed to be celebrated. Not tolerated. Not ignored. Celebrated. And that was when I knew I wasn't broken anymore. I wasn't fixed either. Healing's not a straight line. But I wasn't drowning in silence or shame or bitterness. I was becoming someone I actually liked. Someone I could rely on. Someone who didn't need validation from people who only offered conditional love. And just as I began settling into this new chapter, just as I thought the past might finally stay buried, I got a message. Not a phone call. Not a letter. A DM. From an anonymous Instagram account. No profile picture. No bio. Just one message. "You think this is over? You took everything from me. You're going to pay for what you did." My blood ran cold. I didn't need to guess who it was from. Tyler. I hadn't heard from him in months. No word from my parents either. I thought maybe, finally, they'd accepted that I was gone for good. But now he was back. And he was angry. More than that, he was watching me. Because the message didn't come out of nowhere. It came the day after I posted a picture of me and Alina celebrating my acceptance into a local university's transfer program. I'd captioned it something cheesy like, "New Beginnings." It had maybe 40 likes. Nothing major. But clearly, it had been enough to set him off. I blocked the account immediately, heart racing. Alina told me not to worry, that people like him thrive on reaction. that he was just lashing out because he felt powerless. And I believed her. But that didn't stop me from double-checking the locks on my door that night, or installing a security camera the next day. Because no matter how far I'd come, no matter how strong I felt, the truth was, Tyler had always been unpredictable. And when people like him feel like they're losing control, they become dangerous. He'd already proven he could sabotage me once. And I had a gut feeling he wasn't done trying. What I didn't expect, what I never could have predicted, was how far he'd go to tear me back down. Or how, in trying to ruin me, he'd end up destroying himself. I didn't sleep much after that message. It replayed in my mind in a loop, like a song I didn't ask to hear. You think this is over? You took everything from me. And then the part that really stuck with me. You're going to pay for what you did. It wasn't a threat made in passing. It had weight, intention. It didn't feel like someone just blowing off steam. It felt like a warning. And the scariest part? He wasn't wrong. I did take something from him, but not in the way he meant. Tyler had spent his whole life feeding off of comparisons. Every moment he could steal from me. Attention, praise, sympathy. He consumed like oxygen. When I left, he didn't just lose a brother. He lost his mirror, the person he measured himself against. And now that I'd built something without him, without any of them, the illusion he clung to had shattered. That kind of person doesn't cope. They retaliate. And if there was one thing I knew about Tyler, he never played fair. I blocked the account. I deleted the photo. But I didn't delete the feeling that this wasn't over, not by a long shot. So I started preparing. Quietly. Carefully. The first thing I did was tell Alina everything. We were sitting on the balcony of her apartment, a mug of tea warming my hands as I stared out over the city. She didn't say anything for a while after I finished. She just listened. That's one of the things I loved about her. She didn't jump to fix things. She let you sit with them. Let you breathe. So what do you want to do? She finally asked. I don't know, I said honestly. I don't want to make this a war. But I don't trust him to stay away. She nodded. Then maybe it's time you stopped reacting and started planning. That stuck with me. I realized something in that moment. For most of my life, I'd been on defense. Always managing fallout. Always patching holes after someone else set the fire. But now I had space. I had resources. I had time. And most importantly, I had nothing to lose. Tyler still lived with our parents. I hadn't heard much about them since I left, but I knew they hadn't changed. People like them rarely do. They probably still walked on eggshells around him. Still let him rewrite history and control the narrative. But cracks were showing. That much was clear from his breakdown in my apartment. He wasn't just angry. I'd never seen him scared before. And scared people slip up. So I started watching. I created a fake account. One he wouldn't trace to me. Just a blank profile with no posts, a common name, and a vague bio. I followed some of his old friends from high school, a few extended family members, even some mutuals from my online classes. Anyone who might have had a reason to follow him back. It took 3 days. Then he accepted the follow request. From there, it was easy. He wasn't private. He never had been. Tyler loved attention. Even now, when he was supposedly suffering, he still posted like he was the star of a reality show. Sad selfies with dramatic captions. Song lyrics that barely veiled threats. Screenshots of text with my parents that made them sound like villains. It was a curated mess. But the comments were what caught my eye. One, in particular, stood out. Yo, you still selling those Adderall scripts? Hit me up. The message was old, months before his visit, but it triggered something in my brain. Because when I was still at home, I remembered seeing Tyler take pills before tests. At first, I thought he had a prescription. But then I caught him bragging to a friend once, laughing about how easy it was to get study drugs if you just said the right things during the evaluation. That was years ago. I'd forgotten. But now I wondered, was he selling them? I didn't want to jump to conclusions. But the idea planted a seed. So I dug deeper. I used the same fake account to reach out to one of his old classmates, someone I remembered as being a bit of a loudmouth back in the day. I pretended to be new in town, looking for someone who could help with finals. Casual, harmless language. Nothing too direct. They replied within the hour. Try Tyler, last name. Dudes always got something. I sat back, heart pounding. If Tyler was dealing, even casually, it was only a matter of time before he got caught. And the irony wasn't lost on me. For all his talk about how I stole his life, he was out there risking his future over a few $100 and a high school reputation he couldn't let go of. I knew I had options now. I could report him. Anonymous tip. Let the school handle it. Let the fallout land wherever it landed. But something about that felt incomplete. It wasn't enough. Not yet. Because this wasn't just about Tyler. It was about my parents, too. The ones who listened to his lies. Who looked the other way every time he shoved me down and played victim. Who canceled my 18th birthday because it might hurt his feelings. Who let me leave in silence and never once reached out. I hadn't spoken to them since the letter. But I still had it. Still kept it in a drawer, folded and worn from the number of times I almost threw it out. And now, looking at it again, I noticed something strange. The return address. It wasn't their house. It was a P.O. box. I'd never paid attention before. But now, I did some digging. A few quick searches revealed it was part of a rented mailbox service in a shopping plaza across town. Weird. Why would they send mail from there? Unless they didn't want anyone to know where it came from. That's when it clicked. They hadn't written that letter because they missed me. They wrote it because someone else pressured them to. I started remembering little things. Old conversations with extended family, church members, even teachers who had seen the way my family treated me. Maybe someone had said something. Maybe a social worker got wind of it. Or a distant relative demanded they reach out. And rather than admit what really happened, my parents wrote a letter, sealed it, and never sent it, but made sure it looked like they had. And Tyler destroyed it because he knew if I read it, I might come back. He wasn't just protecting his ego. He was protecting their lie. That was the final piece I needed. Because now, it wasn't just about revenge. It was about truth. So I started building a paper trail. I gathered everything. Screenshots of Tyler's messages, social media posts, the DM he sent me, old voicemails from my parents that I'd saved back when I first left. I wrote down everything I remembered from growing up, the favoritism, the gaslighting, the neglect. I even reached out to a former teacher who'd once pulled me aside in 10th grade and asked if everything was okay at home. I told her the truth. She cried. Then she offered to write a letter on my behalf. And then I did the hardest thing I'd done in a long time. I contacted my aunt. My dad's sister, Mary Ann, had always been a bit of an outlier. She lived a few hours away, rarely came to family events, and was openly critical of my parents when I was younger. I used to think she was just difficult. Now I realized she might have been the only one who ever saw things clearly. I found her email online through a public directory. She was a high school counselor in a nearby district. I sent her a long message. I didn't ask for anything. I just told her the truth, start to finish. She replied the next day. I always knew something wasn't right. I'm so sorry it took this long for someone to believe you. Whatever you're planning, Sam, I'm in. It was the first time someone from my family ever said those words to me. I cried. And then I kept planning. Because Tyler wasn't going to stop until he made me the villain. But I was done playing that role. What he didn't realize was that while he'd been spiraling, I'd been documenting, watching, growing. I had friends now, allies, witnesses. I had a job, a college acceptance letter, a published article with my name on it. He had a trail of pills, a reputation for chaos, and a closet full of skeletons he'd never bothered to lock. I wasn't going to expose him with fire and fury. I was going to do it with the truth. And when it all unraveled, when everything he built on manipulation and lies finally came crashing down, I'd be there. Not to gloat, but to make sure he never pulled anyone else down with him again. It all came together the following spring. By then, my life had shifted completely. I was officially a full-time student, working fewer hours at the nonprofit but doing more meaningful projects, grant writing, outreach planning, community partnerships. I had a routine. I had people. I had peace. But beneath it all, I still carried the weight of what Tyler had said in my apartment. You took the life that was meant for me. He believed that down to his bones. And because he couldn't steal it back, he was hell-bent on tearing it apart. That was his nature. Always was. So when I finally moved forward with my plan, it wasn't out of rage. It wasn't revenge for the sake of revenge. It was closure. Justice. And it started with a single envelope. Inside was a printed packet, 10 pages long. Page 1. A cover letter written by me, with the subject line. Statement of concern. Pages 2 through 10. Documentation. Screenshots. Emails. Character witness statements. Records of harassment. Evidence of drug sales and distribution collected over months. Even a note from my old teacher, now retired, describing years of observed neglect and emotional abuse in our home. I didn't send it to the school. I sent it to 3 places. The university Tyler was still attending. His grades had slipped, but he was still hanging on by a thread. The local police department, with a redacted version focused on the drug sales and online threats, delivered via their anonymous crime tip system. My Aunt Marianne, along with a letter just for her, asking her to send the file to anyone she thought could help if things didn't move fast enough. She did one better. She handed it to a lawyer. And that's when the dominoes started falling. It didn't happen overnight. These things never do. But within 2 weeks, the university's conduct office emailed Tyler to schedule a formal disciplinary hearing. They didn't tell him who submitted the complaint, but they didn't have to. He knew. Because that same week, 2 detectives came to my parents' house asking about a prescription pill ring operating in their son's name. Tyler panicked. He deleted his Instagram, deleted his Twitter, took down every post with even a hint of incrimination. But it was too late. Screenshots don't vanish. Witnesses don't unsee things. And me? I stayed quiet. Until the news broke in our old neighborhood Facebook group. Someone posted that Tyler had been suspended from school, that he was under investigation, that a few students had come forward with screenshots showing him offering pills in exchange for money, or worse, for favors. And just like that, the golden child image he'd clung to for so long shattered in full view. It hit my parents like a freight train. At first, they denied it, said it was all lies, that someone out there had a vendetta. They even tried to blame me, spreading rumors through the extended family that I'd manipulated the situation out of spite. But no one believed them. Not anymore. Because the evidence was undeniable. And I had more allies than they realized. My Aunt Marianne, God bless her, went on a quiet crusade. She contacted family members one by one, shared the letter I sent her, told them what had really happened in our house. The favoritism, the neglect, the years I spent isolated, silenced, and discarded. People listened. They started asking questions. My cousin Emily, who I hadn't spoken to in years, messaged me to say, "I'm so sorry. I wish I'd known. I believe you." Even my grandparents, who had always kept their distance, sent a letter. A real one. "We had no idea what was going on. We thought your parents were just dealing with stress. We see now how wrong we were. We're proud of you, Sam. And we're sorry we weren't there when you needed us most." I cried when I read it. Because it was the first time the people who should have protected me actually took responsibility. But the real moment of justice came during the university hearing. I wasn't there in person. I didn't need to be. My statement had already been submitted, along with all the documentation. But Tyler was there. And so was a student witness, a guy named Malik who'd been burned by him in a deal gone wrong. He'd been afraid to speak up until now, worried about retaliation. But once the university opened the investigation, he stepped forward. He told them everything. And with that, Tyler's academic career imploded. He was expelled. Not just suspended, expelled. His record flagged for criminal conduct. His scholarship revoked. His housing terminated. And because of the police tip, things didn't stop there. He was arrested 2 weeks later. Nothing dramatic, no handcuffs in the front yard, but the mugshot showed up online. It was buried in local news, a tiny piece under campus crime briefs. But I saw it. And so did everyone else. The fallout at home was nuclear. My parents tried to control the narrative, but it slipped through their fingers like water. Tyler had always been their star, their excuse, their projection of everything they wished they were. And now that he'd crumbled, so did their lies. I started getting messages from people who used to mock me, from classmates who ignored me, from old neighbors who used to believe every word my parents said. Every message was the same. I had no idea. "I'm sorry. You didn't deserve that." I didn't respond to most of them. I wasn't doing this for recognition. I was doing it for peace. But there was one thing left. One final moment I needed, not out of anger, but to finally put it all to rest. So I wrote my parents a letter. Short, calm, honest. "Dear Mom and Dad, I know you're looking for someone to blame. I know you want to believe this all came out of nowhere. But the truth is, you built this. You built Tyler into someone who believed he was untouchable. You punished honesty and rewarded manipulation. I didn't ruin his life. I saved mine. I wish things had been different. I really do. But I'm not coming back. I have people now who see me. I have a life that doesn't revolve around walking on eggshells. Don't contact me again. Sam." I didn't expect a response. And I didn't get one. Tyler was sentenced to community service and placed on probation. He avoided jail time. First offense, family lawyer, privilege still working overtime. But his record was marked. He lost job offers, lost credibility. The last I heard, he was working nights at a local warehouse, living back home, barely speaking to anyone. My parents retreated from the world. Their once perfect family image, gone. Their holiday newsletters, canceled. Their smiles at church, hollow. The people who once praised them now whispered behind their backs. And they had no one left to blame. Just the truth. And me? I graduated. Alina and I moved into a bigger place, one with windows and warm floors and no ghosts in the corners. She framed my first published article and hung it by the desk where I write now. We host dinners with friends, celebrate birthdays without guilt. And sometimes, when I walk past a mirror, I barely recognize myself. Not because I've changed, but because I've finally become me. I used to think revenge was about hurting someone back. But now I know the most powerful revenge is simply this: living a life they can't touch, and they never will again. I'm Jake, 28, and for the last 2 years my entire life has been my app. I quit a steady job to build it, drained my savings, lived on instant noodles for longer than I'd like to admit, and learned to celebrate little milestones by myself. Every beta test, every late-night breakthrough, every bug fix that made me want to throw my laptop out the window. By the time the launch date rolled around, I'd barely slept for 3 nights straight, but I was buzzing with adrenaline. This was supposed to be the night where everything finally felt worth it. I rented a small but trendy event space downtown for the launch party. Nothing fancy, just some catered food, a rented speaker, and a slideshow looping through screenshots of the app on the projector. I'd invited my closest friends, a few early users, and of course my family. Mom, Dad, and my older brother Ezra. I figured they might finally be proud of me, or at least curious enough to show up. They'd been skeptical from day one, always asking when I was going to get a real job again. As people started arriving, I kept glancing at the door, waiting for my family. My friends showed up first, cheering and giving me hugs, telling me how proud they were that I'd stuck it out. The room slowly filled with chatter and music, and I let myself relax. For the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe. I kept checking my phone just in case. Maybe they were running late. Then I saw Ezra's post pop up on social media. A boomerang video of champagne glasses clinking, captioned, "Promotion night." I clicked through his story and saw my parents there too, laughing, celebrating him getting promoted to senior manager at his company. Same night as my launch party, and not a single text telling me they wouldn't make it. It felt like someone had pulled the floor out from under me. For a second, I just stood there staring at my phone, the noise of the party around me turning into a dull hum. People were asking me questions about the app, congratulating me, and I smiled and nodded, but inside I was burning. They hadn't just skipped my launch. They hadn't even thought it was worth mentioning. When the party ended and the last guest left, the silence in the room hit me like a wave. The projector was still on, looping through the same slides, the empty plates stacked on the table. That's when my phone buzzed. "Dad, we need to discuss your company." "Mom, this isn't a real career." "Ezra, congrats on your little project." I just stared at the screen, my hands tightening around the phone. All the exhaustion, the rejection, the months of hearing, "When will you settle down?" and "This can't last forever," just boiled over at once. I didn't reply right away. I sat there in the empty venue, thinking about every time they had brushed me off, every time Ezra's achievements were treated like gold while mine were treated like hobbies. And for the first time, I didn't feel like defending myself. I didn't feel like explaining the value of what I'd built or begging for their approval. I typed back just one sentence, my fingers steady despite the knot in my chest. "Check tomorrow's news." And I meant it, because tomorrow, everything would change. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of my phone vibrating on the nightstand. I had fallen asleep on the couch with my laptop open, still in my launch party clothes. My head was pounding, not from alcohol, but from the weight of everything I'd been holding in. The messages from my family were still burned into my brain. When I opened my phone, there were more messages waiting. Dad had followed up, "We need to talk today. Ezra has some ideas for how you can make this app more profitable. Let's have a family call." Mom's text was shorter but just as sharp. "You should be grateful Ezra is willing to help you before this gets out of hand." And then Ezra, of course. "Can you hop on a Zoom call this afternoon? I think I can save you from wasting more time." That was the thing about my brother. He didn't just think he was smarter. He thought he was entitled to be in charge of my life. He'd been that way since we were kids. Ezra was the golden boy, the firstborn, the one who got the best tutors, the private soccer coach, the shiny new car for his 18th birthday. I got his hand-me-down bike with the bent handlebars. If Ezra wanted to go out to dinner, the whole family went out. If I wanted to go to a coding camp, Mom said it was too expensive, but 2 months later she paid for Ezra's photography workshop without blinking. I sat there rereading their messages and thinking about how predictable it all was. Of course they had turned my launch, the one moment that was supposed to be mine, into another chance to make it about Ezra. When the call time came around, I reluctantly joined. Dad was already on, sitting in his office at home, Mom next to him sipping coffee. Ezra joined last, clearly dialing in from work because he was still in his dress shirt and tie. Finally, Dad said, not even a hello. "Jake, we're worried about you. This business." "It's not a business yet," Mom cut in. "It's a project. You need stability." Ezra nodded like he was some kind of expert. "Look, little bro, I'm not saying the app is bad. It's cute. But you need a business plan that makes sense. I have some connections that could buy you out for a decent sum. You'd get some money back and move on to something more realistic." I sat there, silent, letting them talk over each other. It was like a well-rehearsed play. Mom with her gentle butt-cutting voice, Dad with his disappointed sighs, Ezra with his smug smirk like he was the only adult in the room. "I don't want to sell," I finally said. My voice was calm, but my hands were shaking under the table. "This is my company. I'm not cashing out before it even has a chance." Dad pinched the bridge of his nose. "Jake, you've been playing around with this thing for years. Ezra is offering you a chance to turn it into something respectable." "Respectable?" I repeated, almost laughing. "You didn't even come to my launch party." That shut them up for a second, but only for a second. Mom looked offended. "We were at Ezra's promotion dinner. You know how important that was for his career." "Exactly," Ezra said, leaning back in his chair like he had won the argument. "And you should be happy for me instead of holding a grudge." That was when I realized this wasn't just about last night. It never was. It was about the pattern, the way every milestone in my life had been measured against Ezra's, and mine always came up short. "Jake," Dad said finally, his voice taking on that tone he used whenever he wanted to end an argument. "We just want what's best for you. And what's best is to let someone with more experience handle this before it collapses. Do you want to be 30 and still living like a college kid?" I stared at the little boxes on the screen, their faces all looking at me like I was the problem. For a moment, I felt that old familiar guilt creeping in. Maybe they were right. Maybe I was foolish for turning down a buyout when I was barely paying rent. Maybe Ezra really did know better. But then I remembered last night. I remembered my friends clapping for me, the early users telling me how excited they were to use the app, the feeling of seeing something I had built come to life. And that guilt started to turn into something else. Anger, but sharper, more focused. "I'm not selling," I said again, louder this time. "And I don't need Ezra's help." Mom's mouth tightened into a thin line. Dad muttered something under his breath about me being stubborn. Ezra just shrugged. "Fine," he said casually, "but don't come crying to me when it flops." The call ended a minute later, but I just sat there staring at the blank screen. It wasn't just the lack of support. It was the way they had turned my success into a problem to be solved. Later that week, I found out through a mutual friend that Ezra had been bragging at work about helping his little brother get serious and was already talking to a couple of investors about taking over my idea if I changed my mind. He even posted a picture on LinkedIn of himself at a networking event with the caption, "Excited about potential tech opportunities in the family." That post hit me harder than I expected. It wasn't just that he was inserting himself into my project. He was claiming credit before he even did anything. My stomach twisted as I scrolled through the comments. Colleagues congratulating him. People calling him a visionary. Not one mention of me. And just when I thought it couldn't get more insulting, Mom called to say she'd gone ahead and shared some of my pitch deck slides with Ezra so he could shop it around to the right people. "You what?" I asked, gripping the phone so tight my knuckles went white. "Don't be dramatic, Jake. We're just trying to help you before you make a mistake. It's not your decision to make. Ezra just wants to make sure you don't miss your chance." I hung up before I said something I couldn't take back. That night, I stayed up late going through my files, checking permissions, making sure everything was secure. I changed passwords, revoked sharing links, locked everything down. If they wanted to treat me like a child, fine, but they weren't going to hijack my work. Still, A part of me knew this wasn't over. The texts kept coming. Dad sent me articles about startup failure rates. Mom kept saying I was hurting the family by being so difficult. Ezra even left a voice message casually suggesting that if I wanted to avoid burning out, he could just run the company for me. By the end of the week, I felt like I was under siege. Every ping from my phone made my stomach tighten. I started ignoring calls altogether. I buried myself in work, pushing updates, tweaking features, anything to keep my mind busy. Then, 3 days later, something happened that made everything snap into focus. It was late in the evening when I got an email from one of my beta users, someone I didn't know personally. The subject line just said, "Is this you?" Inside was a screenshot of a pitch deck presentation, my pitch deck, but with Ezra's name on it, presented at some local entrepreneur meetup. My logo, my slides, my words. I sat there staring at the screen for a long time, my chest pounding, my hands cold. I must have read that email 10 times, hoping I had misunderstood. But no, the screenshots were clear. My slides, my app's logo, even my carefully worded tagline, all neatly displayed under a title slide that read, "Presented by Ezra Collins." I felt a rush of heat crawl up my neck, followed by that hollow, weightless feeling you get when you've been hit with bad news so hard your body doesn't know what to do with it yet. I immediately called the person who had sent me the email. She was a soft-spoken beta tester named Layla who had been giving me feedback since the earliest version of the app. "I thought you should know," she said quietly. "I attended this startup networking event tonight, and your brother was the keynote. He said he was leading a new project, and he pitched your app as something he was developing with his team. He even mentioned he might be looking for co-founders and investors soon." I thanked her for letting me know, hung up, and just sat there staring into space. My own brother had stood in front of a room full of investors and founders, taken my work, and passed it off as his. When the initial shock wore off, anger came rushing in like a tidal wave. I pulled up LinkedIn and there it was, a shiny new post from Ezra, complete with a photo of him on stage, microphone in hand, my app's home screen projected behind him. The caption read, "Thrilled to be sharing the next big thing we're building. Exciting opportunities ahead, stay tuned." The comments were full of congratulations, heart emojis, proud of you messages. I wanted to throw my phone across the room. Instead, I took screenshots, lots of them. Every slide, every comment, every post. The next morning, I woke up to a string of texts from my mom. "Mom, Ezra did such a great job last night. Mom, people were really impressed. I think this will finally get you the recognition you need. Mom, don't be mad. You should be grateful he's putting your little idea on the map." I called her immediately, my voice shaking. "You knew he was going to do this?" "Of course," she said matter-of-factly. "He asked me for the slides. I thought it would be good for you. You're too close to it, Jake. Ezra knows how to present in a way people understand. You gave him my work without asking me." I could barely keep my voice steady. "That's not helping me, Mom. That's stealing." There was a pause, then that calm, infuriating tone she always used when she thought I was being childish. "You always take things so personally. Ezra isn't stealing. He's elevating. He's giving you a platform. Do you really think you could have gotten that many people interested on your own?" I hung up before I said something I couldn't take back. My hands were trembling. My mom, my own mother, had sided with Ezra in handing over my intellectual property like it was some school project she could redistribute. Later that afternoon, Ezra called me directly. I almost didn't answer, but a part of me wanted to hear what he would say. "Hey, little bro," he said cheerfully, as if nothing had happened. "Did you see the response we got from the pitch? Pretty exciting, right?" I snapped. "You mean the response you got from stealing my work?" He laughed, like I was overreacting. "Come on, man. Don't be like that. I didn't steal anything. I was just testing the waters. Investors want to know there's someone experienced leading a project before they put in money. You know they'd never trust a solo founder with no track record. I'm doing you a favor. You put your name on it, Ezra. You made it sound like it was your app." He sighed. "Because it will be ours if you stop being stubborn. Look, Jake, you're good at the technical stuff, but let's be honest, you're not a CEO. I can get funding, build a team, scale this thing. You can stay on as the developer and get a nice salary. Everybody wins." I went quiet, my jaw so tight it hurt. "So your solution is to push me out of my own company?" "You wouldn't be pushed out," he said smoothly. "You'd just be supported. Think about it, Jake. You're barely scraping by right now. You've got bills piling up. You've got no investors. You need me. And if you keep being difficult, you're just going to watch this whole thing die." Something about the way he said it, so casual, so confident, made my blood run cold. This wasn't just Ezra being annoying. This was a hostile takeover attempt, and my parents had practically handed him the keys. I didn't say anything else. I just hung up. The next few days were some of the longest of my life. Everywhere I looked online, I saw Ezra's posts getting traction. More pictures of him pitching, more comments about how innovative his project was. At one point, a tech blog even ran a tiny feature about local entrepreneur Ezra Collins launching a promising new app. They didn't mention me at all. It got worse. I received an email from a VC firm I had been courting for months. They thanked me for my time, but said they had decided not to move forward because they were already in talks with another founder working on something similar. I knew exactly who they meant. I tried to talk to Dad about it, hoping he'd at least understand the seriousness of what was happening. He just brushed me off. "You're being dramatic. This is business, Jake. Ezra is helping you get a foot in the door. You should be thanking him." "Thanking him," I said, incredulous. "For stealing my idea? For cutting me out of my own company?" Dad's tone hardened. "He's not cutting you out. He's saving you from yourself. You have a habit of biting off more than you can chew. Don't throw away this opportunity because of pride." I left the call shaking with anger. They really didn't see it. Or worse, they did and they didn't care. The final straw came at the end of the week. I was at a coffee shop working on a patch when a notification popped up. Ezra had announced a formal launch date for his company, complete with a press release and an RSVP link for a launch event. The date was 2 weeks from now. I sat there frozen, my coffee growing cold. He wasn't just taking credit anymore. He was moving ahead without me, with my idea, my code, my design, as if I didn't exist. And for the first time since this all started, I didn't feel hurt. I felt something colder, heavier, sharper. This wasn't going to end with a family call or a polite conversation. This was war. I didn't leave that coffee shop for hours. I just sat there staring at my laptop, my cursor blinking on a line of code I couldn't focus on anymore. People came and went around me. Cups clinked. The espresso machine hissed, but it all felt far away. The launch event link was still open on my phone. Ezra's smiling face in the banner, RSVP button glowing like a taunt. I packed up my laptop and walked home slowly, the city lights blurring together. When I got back to my apartment, I just stood in the doorway for a while. The place looked even smaller than usual. I'd worked so hard in this cramped one-bedroom, spent nights on the floor with my laptop, lived off takeout when I was too busy to cook, stared at these walls during every moment of doubt and every tiny victory. And now, somehow, it all felt like it belonged to someone else. For the next few days, I barely spoke to anyone. My friends tried checking in after hearing about the launch party, but I kept my replies short. I didn't want to admit how bad things had gotten. I woke up late, ignored messages, didn't even look at my code. The app one had poured myself into felt like it had been taken from me, and I couldn't bring myself to touch it. What made it worse was how quiet my family had gone. No more texts from Mom, no calls from Dad, not even a smug message from Ezra. It was like they'd moved on without me entirely, and in a way, they had. The world was cheering him on while I was sitting in a dark apartment, watching my savings account drain with every bill that came due. I thought about selling everything, not the company, but my stuff. The gaming console I barely touched anymore, the bike I never had time to ride, the old watch Dad gave me for my 21st birthday. I thought about cashing out what little was left of my emergency fund and just leaving, moving somewhere cheap, getting a quiet job, disappearing from all of this. The thought was equal parts comforting and crushing. One night, I went for a walk to clear my head and ended up outside my parents' house without even realizing it. The lights were on, silhouettes moving behind the curtains. I stood there across the street like some stranger, watching. Through the front window, I caught a glimpse of them sitting around the dining table. Ezra was there too. They were laughing at something he said, wine glasses in hand, looking so comfortable, so united. For a second, I wanted to knock on the door, to march in there and scream until they understood what they had done to me. But then I imagined the look on their faces, the polite, pitying smiles, the way they'd tell me I was overreacting. And I couldn't do it. I turned around and walked home, my hands shoved deep in my pockets. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, my mind spinning. The anger was still there, But now it had cooled into something quieter, something that scared me a little with how calm it felt. I started thinking about the code, about how much of the app's infrastructure was still entirely under my control. The servers, the database, the API keys, all of it tied to accounts that only I had access to. I didn't act on it right away. Instead, I started by protecting what was left. I pulled every repo offline, encrypted my backups, moved everything to a fresh system. I even reached out to a lawyer friend, casually asking what could be done if someone was presenting my work as their own. Her answer wasn't encouraging. Technically, I had rights, but fighting over them would be expensive and time-consuming. And with Ezra already making public moves, it might turn into a messy legal battle. But the conversation planted a seed. If I couldn't fight him openly yet, maybe I could make sure that when the time came, I had everything I needed to prove that this was my work, my code, my idea, my company. I documented everything: emails, time-stamped commits, design files. I created a paper trail so clear no one could deny it. Meanwhile, I kept my head down. When my parents finally reached out again, a short, clipped message asking if I was ready to be reasonable yet, I didn't respond. Ezra sent me a launch invite with a little winking emoji. I left it on read. The silence seemed to irritate them more than arguing ever did. A few days later, Dad left a voicemail that started calm but turned sharp by the end. "You're acting immature, Jake. This family has done nothing but support you, and now you're throwing it back in our faces. Ezra is trying to build something for all of us, and you're jeopardizing that with your pride. Think about what kind of example you're setting." I deleted the message but kept the transcription, another piece of the puzzle, another reminder of how they were rewriting the narrative. They weren't just ignoring my work anymore. They were framing me as the one causing trouble, the unreasonable one. As the days passed, I could feel something shifting in me. The grief was still there, grief for the relationship I used to think I had with my family, grief for the simple pride I wanted from them but never got. But beneath that grief was something harder: determination. I stopped sleeping in and started running again, just to clear my head. I fixed bugs in the app, not because I had to, but because it reminded me this was mine. Every line of code was a small act of defiance. Every feature I polished was one more thing they couldn't take credit for. One evening, I sat down with a notebook and started mapping things out. If Ezra was going to hold his fake launch in 2 weeks, what could I do in the meantime? I wasn't ready to strike yet, not without a plan. But maybe I could prepare. Maybe I could make sure that when the time came, my voice would be louder than his. I stayed up until 3 in the morning sketching out ideas. A real launch plan, a list of press contacts, even a draft of a blog post that told the story from my perspective, the real story. Every word felt like taking back a piece of what they'd stolen. For the first time in days, I felt something like hope. I wasn't ready to go to war yet, but I was done hiding. And as I closed the notebook and looked at the calendar, I realized something. Ezra's launch date was closer than I'd thought. Just over a week now. I stared at the date for a long time, then slowly smiled. If Ezra wanted a launch, he was going to get one. The morning after I filled that notebook with plans, I woke up feeling different. My apartment didn't look as small. The air didn't feel as heavy. I brewed coffee, sat at my desk, and opened my laptop with a clarity I hadn't felt in months. The app stared back at me, the thing I had built from nothing. And for the first time since this mess began, I felt proud again. I started working in deep, focused bursts. It wasn't just coding anymore. It was like strategizing for battle. I updated the onboarding process so new users would get a slicker, more satisfying experience. I wrote cleaner documentation and built a back-end dashboard that let me monitor growth and engagement in real time. Every improvement was a quiet promise to myself that if I was going to fight, I'd do it with something polished, something worthy of the attention it was about to get. I also started reconnecting with the people who actually believed in me. I called a few friends from the launch party, the ones who had stayed until the end, who had congratulated me sincerely, and told them what was going on. To my surprise, they were furious on my behalf. "Dude, that's insane," my friend Marco said over the phone. "He literally stole your work? You have to clap back. We'll help you make noise about it." "Yeah," my friend Layla chimed in. The same Layla who had sent me that first email. "If you put the Real launch together, I'll share it everywhere. People need to know who actually built this." That support lit a fire in me. I wasn't as alone as I thought. Over the next few days, I assembled a small group of friends who were willing to pitch in, designers, marketers, people who just wanted to lend a hand. We set up a group chat and started working on a guerrilla launch plan. One friend helped me create a killer landing page that highlighted not just the app, but my journey, the late nights, the obstacles, the small wins along the way. Another friend offered to shoot a short promo video for free using his DSLR camera. We filmed in my tiny apartment, me talking straight to the lens, explaining why I built this app and what problem it solved. I was nervous at first, but when we played it back, I barely recognized myself. I didn't look like the exhausted, defeated guy from a week ago. I looked like someone with a vision. At the same time, I quietly started reaching out to early users and small tech bloggers, sharing sneak peeks of new features and inviting them to be part of the official launch. Some of them had already seen Ezra's posts and were confused, asking if we were working together. I calmly explained the situation. No, this is my company. I'm the founder. The other person is my brother, who presented my work without permission. Most of them were sympathetic, and a few even promised to write about the real story once I went public. And then, almost by chance, I got a message that changed everything. It was from a small but influential startup newsletter that I'd subscribed to for years. One of their writers had heard about my app through a mutual contact and wanted to feature it in their next issue, but only if I could provide an interview and some screenshots by the weekend. My heart was pounding as I typed back, absolutely. This was it, the first real media attention for my app, and it was going to come out before Ezra's fake launch. The interview went better than I could have hoped. The writer asked smart questions, and I spoke openly about the challenges of being a solo founder, about building something from scratch with no safety net. I didn't mention Ezra by name, not yet, but I made sure it was clear who the founder was. When the article went live, the effect was immediate. Traffic to my site spiked. Beta signups doubled in a single day. People were tweeting about the app, tagging me, leaving comments like, "Can't wait to try this," and "Finally a solution to this problem." And then, almost poetically, one of Ezra's LinkedIn contacts shared the article, tagging me this time, not him. The caption read, "Big congrats to Jake Collins for building something so impressive." I won't lie, I screenshotted that post and stared at it for a while. But the best part wasn't just the attention. It was the data. I watched in real time as new users signed up and actually started using the app. The engagement numbers were climbing higher than they had ever been during the beta phase. Whatever Ezra thought he had, it wasn't this. At night, I worked on the final preparations for my own launch event. It wasn't going to be a fancy ballroom like Ezra had booked, but it didn't need to be. I found a local co-working space that let me rent their biggest conference room. I sent out private invitations to early users, bloggers, friends, and even a few small investors I had been cautiously in touch with before. I kept my family completely out of the loop. They didn't get an invite. They didn't get a heads up. They could read about it in the paper like everyone else. As the days ticked down, I noticed a shift not just in the project, but in myself. I was waking up early again, energized. I was eating properly, exercising, sleeping better. For months, I had been living under this shadow, letting their opinions dictate how I felt about myself. But now I felt like I was steering my own life again. The night before the launch, I stayed late at the co-working space, putting the finishing touches on the presentation. It was simple but powerful. Real screenshots, real testimonials, real results. No corporate buzzwords, no empty promises. Just proof. When I got home, I checked my phone and saw another message from Ezra. "Ezra, hope you're coming to the launch tomorrow. It'll be good for the family to be united on stage." I didn't respond. Instead, I closed the message, plugged in my phone, and went to bed smiling. Because tomorrow wasn't his day anymore. It was mine. And by the time he found out what I had planned, it would already be too late for him to stop it. The morning of my launch day, I woke up before my alarm. For once, I didn't feel that knot of dread sitting in my stomach. It was replaced by something calmer, heavier, like standing at the top of a hill, knowing gravity was finally about to do the rest. I brewed coffee, put on the outfit I had picked the night before, crisp, simple, professional, and reviewed my checklist one last time. The slides were ready. The landing page was queued to go live the moment I hit the button. The group chat with my friends was buzzing. They were already at the co-working space, setting up chairs and testing the projector. As I got ready to head out, my phone lit up with another message from Ezra. "Ezra, Just a reminder, doors open at 6 for the launch. Would mean a lot if you came. I stared at the screen, shaking my head. He really thought I was going to sit in the audience while he took a victory lap with my work. Instead, I opened my laptop and scheduled the newsletter I had written the night before. It wasn't long, just a short but clear statement of what I had built and why. It included screenshots, links to the live app, and a personal note from me. This has been 2 years in the making. I built this from the ground up with no investors, no backing, no safety net, just a vision and a lot of sleepless nights. Today, I'm proud to share it with the world. At the bottom, I added a subtle but important line. If you've seen anyone else presenting this as their work, they are not affiliated with my company. And then I scheduled it to go live right as Ezra's event began. When I arrived at the co-working space, the energy in the room was electric. Friends were milling around. People I barely knew were chatting about the app. A photographer friend was setting up his camera. There was even a local tech reporter who had seen the newsletter teaser and decided to cover the event. "This is bigger than we thought," Marco said, grinning as he handed me a coffee. "You ready?" "More than ready," I said, and I meant it. The launch went better than I could have imagined. The room was full, the demo went off without a hitch, and when I showed the live user numbers ticking upward, people actually clapped. When it was over, people came up to shake my hand, ask questions, take selfies. By the time I got home that evening, the app's servers were humming with traffic. My inbox was full of inquiries from small investors, and even one well-known tech podcast that wanted to feature me. But the best part hadn't even happened yet. Around 6:30, right in the middle of Ezra's event, my newsletter went out. Within minutes, I started seeing it shared on social media. People were tagging me, congratulating me, quoting my line about, "If you've seen anyone else presenting this as their work." It didn't call Ezra out by name, but it didn't have to. By 7 o'clock, I got the first angry text. "Mom, what did you just send out? Ezra is furious. People are asking questions at his event." I didn't reply. 10 minutes later, another text. "Ezra, what are you doing? You're ruining everything." Again, I didn't reply. Instead, I opened my analytics dashboard and watched as user signups surged again. The timing couldn't have been more perfect. People at Ezra's event were clearly checking their phones, clicking through, and signing up for my version of the app. And then something happened that almost made me laugh out loud. Someone in attendance at Ezra's launch, maybe out of spite, maybe just curious, live tweeted the whole thing. One tweet read, "So apparently the guy on stage isn't even the founder? Just found the actual creator's launch post. Awkward." The replies were brutal. People were tagging Ezra, asking for clarification, some even accusing him of fraud. By the end of the night, my story was trending locally. But that wasn't the only thing that shifted that week. The following morning, I woke up to an email from a well-known investor I had admired for years. She wrote, "I saw what happened yesterday. I've been following your app for a while, and I'd like to talk about funding. Your story is exactly what this space needs." I read it 3 times just to make sure I wasn't imagining it. This wasn't just about beating Ezra anymore. This was about building something bigger than I had ever dreamed. That same day, the startup newsletter that had featured me earlier decided to run a follow-up piece. This time, they didn't hold back. The headline was blunt. "Local founder faces family battle over stolen startup idea. Here's his side of the story." The article went into detail, citing screenshots, timestamps, and interviews with people who knew the timeline. They didn't outright vilify Ezra, but they didn't make him look good either. Within hours, Ezra's LinkedIn posts started disappearing. The event photos vanished. Even the RSVP link for his launch went dead. But my phone, it didn't stop buzzing. More investors, more users, more people asking how they could support me. By the end of the week, I had signed my first real term sheet. It wasn't life-changing money, not yet, but it was enough to secure a runway, hire a couple of contractors, and give the app the boost it needed. When I told Marco, he nearly tackled me with a hug. "You did it, man. You actually turned this around." But I wasn't done yet. Because while Ezra was licking his wounds, I was quietly putting something much bigger into motion. One of the investors I met had a connection at a major tech conference, the kind that gets press coverage far beyond our city. They offered me a speaking slot in the next month's lineup, right on the main stage. I said yes, and as I closed my laptop that night, I realized just how much had changed. A few weeks ago, I was sitting in a coffee shop wondering if I should just walk away. Now I had users, funding, media coverage, and soon, a platform to tell the entire world exactly who built this. Ezra had tried to take my company from me. Now I had the power to take everything back. And maybe, just maybe, to make sure he could never try something like this again. The month leading up to the tech conference felt like moving through a storm I had finally learned to navigate. For the first time in a long time, I was calm, focused, but calm, because I knew exactly what I was building toward. This wasn't about getting even anymore. It was about showing everyone, including my family, exactly who I was and what I was capable of without their approval, without their interference, and especially without Ezra trying to put his fingerprints on my work. I spent those weeks refining every detail of my app, my pitch, and my presentation. My small but growing team helped me prepare live demos and mock Q&As, and I practiced so much that I could deliver the talk in my sleep. But the real revenge wasn't just going to be on stage, it was going to be in how I told the story. 2 days before the conference, I received a text from Ezra. "Ezra, are you really speaking at TechCNF? I just got word and my inbox is blowing up. What are you planning to say?" I stared at the message for a long time, then just sent back one line. "Don't worry, I'll make sure people know who built this." He didn't reply. The night before my talk, I barely slept. Not because I was nervous, though there were some butterflies, but because I felt a strange sense of anticipation, like standing backstage before a big show. This wasn't just about Ezra anymore. This was my chance to step out of the shadow of my family entirely. When the day came, I walked into the conference hall and felt the energy buzzing through the crowd. Hundreds of people milling around, startup founders pitching their ideas, investors scribbling notes. My slot was right after lunch, prime time, right when the room would be full again. I waited backstage, laptop in hand, while the speaker before me wrapped up. Then the MC introduced me. "Next up, we have Jake Collins, founder and developer of AppName, a project that's been getting a lot of attention lately for its innovative approach and incredible backstory." The applause washed over me as I stepped onto the stage, the bright lights making it impossible to see anything beyond the first few rows. I took a deep breath and started speaking. I began with the app itself, what problem it solved, the journey of building it, the technical challenges I'd faced. But about halfway through, I shifted gears. "I want to share something a little personal," I said, letting my voice drop just enough to make the room lean in. Because building this wasn't just a technical journey for me. It was a test of everything I thought I knew about perseverance, about trust, even about family. The room was quiet now, waiting. I built this alone. For 2 years, I lived and breathed this project. And just when I was ready to share it with the world, someone very close to me tried to take it. They stood on a stage, presented my work as their own, and told me I wasn't capable of leading my own company. There was a ripple through the audience. You could feel the tension tighten. I could have given up then. I almost did. But instead, I decided to launch anyway. And what happened next proved something I'll never forget. When you build something authentic, something real, the truth has a way of finding its way to the surface. I clicked to the next slide, screenshots of the app's growth since the launch, the spike in user numbers, the media coverage. The audience started to murmur, impressed. Today, we have thousands of active users, growing every day. We've secured funding, we're hiring, and we're here because we refuse to let someone else write our story. I ended with a line I had practiced dozens of times. So if anyone ever tells you that you don't deserve what you've built, that you should step aside and let someone else take credit, prove them wrong. Build louder. Build better. Make them watch. The applause that followed wasn't polite. It was thunderous. People were on their feet, clapping and cheering. I could feel my heart pounding, but it wasn't fear anymore. It was relief. When I stepped off stage, my phone was blowing up. The talk had been recorded and was already making the rounds on social media. People were quoting that last line, tagging me, calling it one of the most inspiring talks of the conference. And then, almost poetically, Ezra texted me again. "Ezra, you didn't have to humiliate me like that." I typed back, slowly, deliberately. "I didn't say your name once. If you feel humiliated, that's on you." He didn't reply. Later that night, I posted a photo from the conference. Me on stage, mid-sentence, the crowd behind me. My caption was simple. 2 years ago, this was just an idea. Yesterday, it was almost taken from me. Today, it belongs to everyone who believed. Thank you for helping me prove that the work speaks for itself. Within hours, it had thousands of likes, hundreds of shares. And buried among the comments were messages from people I hadn't heard from in years. Old friends, former coworkers, even one of my college professors, all telling me how proud they were. But the most satisfying moment came the next morning when I opened my inbox and saw an email forwarded to me by a friend who had attended Ezra's event weeks earlier. It was from one of the investors he'd been courting. Ezra, after seeing yesterday's talk and reviewing the documentation provided by the actual founder, we're withdrawing our interest. We invest in founders who lead with integrity. Best of luck. I stared at that email for a long time, then closed my laptop and just sat there smiling. Because this wasn't just revenge. This was reclamation. This was me taking back my story, my work, my life. And I had a feeling Ezra and my parents were finally starting to realize they couldn't control me anymore. But there was still one last thing I needed to do. Something that would make it absolutely clear, once and for all, that the days of them dismissing me, talking over me, treating me like a side character in my own life, those days were over. And I already knew exactly when and where I was going to do it. 2 weeks after the conference, the final blow came, and it came quietly, not with shouting, not with a big confrontation, but with a single piece of paper. I was sitting at my desk, answering emails from a few new angel investors who were interested in joining our seed round, when I got a notification from the state's business registry. I opened it, thinking it was just a routine filing confirmation, and there it was. Ezra's LLC, the one he had hastily registered to launch his company, had been officially dissolved. It shouldn't have felt as satisfying as it did, but it was like exhaling for the first time in months. He hadn't called me. He hadn't texted. He had just quietly shut the whole thing down. But I wasn't naive enough to think that meant everything was over. No, my family wasn't done yet. That Sunday, my parents invited me to dinner, their first attempt to bring me over since everything had happened. For a moment, I considered ignoring the invitation. But then I thought about how far I'd come, about how much of this had been lived in silence, about how many times I'd swallowed my pride to keep the peace. No more swallowing anything. When I walked into the house, the air was tense. Ezra was already there, sitting stiffly at the dining table. Mom was bustling around the kitchen like nothing had happened. Dad was standing with his arms crossed, and for a second, it almost felt like one of those forced family dinners from years ago where they pretended everything was fine. Until Mom finally broke the silence. "Jake," she said softly, setting down a plate. "We just want to talk." I sat across from Ezra, who wouldn't meet my eyes. "Then talk," I said. Dad cleared his throat. "We think things got out of hand. The posts, the articles, the conference, you didn't have to make it so public." Ezra's reputation took a big hit. I let out a short laugh. He pitched my work as his own. He tried to take my company. And you want me to apologize because people found out? Mom winced. "You didn't have to embarrass the family." I leaned forward, my voice calm but steady. "You embarrassed yourselves. Not once in this entire process did any of you ask me what I wanted. You decided you knew better. You tried to sell my work out from under me, and when I said no, you treated me like I was ungrateful. I had to fight just to get credit for something I built with my own hands." Ezra finally looked up then, his jaw tight. "I was trying to help you." "No," I said. "You were trying to own me. You couldn't stand that I did something without you, so you took it. And now you have to live with the fact that everyone knows it wasn't yours." For a moment, no one spoke. The room was thick with the sound of it, the truth just hanging there, undeniable. Then I stood. "You know what's funny?" I said, almost smiling. "I don't even need you to say you're sorry. I don't need you to like me. I don't need anything from you anymore. Because the people who matter, they know the truth. And they showed up for me." I took my jacket from the back of the chair, walked to the door, and stopped with my hand on the knob. "You wanted me to step aside and let someone else take over my story. Instead, you just made it bigger. You made me bigger." When I opened the door, Mom said softly, "So that's it. You're just walking away." I turned back, looked at each of them. My mom still clutching the dish towel, my dad frowning, Ezra staring at the table like it might save him. "Yeah," I said quietly. "That's it." And then I walked out, shutting the door behind me. I didn't look back. That night, I sat in my apartment, the city lights glowing outside my window, and I scheduled one last post, a photo from the conference stage, me smiling in front of a slide that said Founder, Jake Collins. The caption was just one line. They tried to take my story. I wrote a better ending. When I woke up the next morning, it had gone viral. For the first time in years, I felt completely, unmistakably free. My name's Brandon, I'm 34, and for as long as I can remember, I've been the one behind the curtain pulling the strings, quietly organizing, paying, fixing, smoothing things over while my family smiled for the photos. I don't say that to sound noble. It's just how things always were. I was the responsible one, the dependable one, the planner. When I was 12, I was already scheduling my mom's doctor appointments and helping my younger siblings with their homework. Dad used to pat me on the back and call me the glue. But glue doesn't get thanked. It just holds everything together until it breaks. Dad was turning 65 this year. A big number. Retirement, Medicare, the whole shebang. I figured I'd pull out all the stops. He always said he wanted to visit the Caribbean, somewhere warm, sunny, with crystal clear water and endless buffets. I started planning the trip 6 months in advance. I researched cruise lines, cabins, shore excursions. I even coordinated with the ship's events manager to have a custom cake made with Happy 65th, Captain Ken, written in gold icing. The trip cost me $10,200 total. I didn't blink. This was for my dad. And not just for him, it was for the whole family. I booked cabins for my parents, my younger brother Kevin and his wife, my sister Jenna and her girlfriend Lisa, and myself. 7 of us total. I made sure everyone had a private balcony and a fully paid itinerary, snorkeling in St. Thomas, ziplining in San Juan, rum tasting in Barbados. Everything. I even made personalized luggage tags. 3 days before the trip, I was sitting at my desk, going over my packing list, when my phone buzzed. It was a group text from Jenna. Hey Brandon, just FYI, we gave your cabin to Lisa instead. Dad said she makes him laugh more and he wants her closer during the cruise. Hope that's cool. I blinked at the screen, then reread it. I scrolled up to make sure I hadn't missed a joke. Maybe this was part of some surprise they had planned? Nope. Kevin had replied, LOL classic dad. Lisa reacted with a heart emoji. No one addressed me. No one asked if I was okay giving up the room I paid for. No one even bothered to say thanks. My room, my trip, my card. And I was bumped like I was some random extra who'd wandered onto their vacation. I just sat there for a long time. Not angry. Not yet. Mostly stunned. You know that tight feeling behind your eyes, like pressure before a storm? That's what it felt like. A slow, bitter recognition that this wasn't new. It was just the most expensive version of a very old pattern. I was always the giver. And they took. Lisa was funnier. Lisa was more fun. Lisa was closer to the family. And I was the organizer. The wallet. The backup plan. I stared at the message for a long time before replying. Copy that. That's all I said. Not okay. Not cool. Just 2 words that could mean anything. They didn't follow up. That night, I poured myself a whiskey, opened my laptop, and logged into every single reservation portal I had access to. The cruise line. The private island excursion. The cake vendor. Even the group airport shuttle I had arranged to get everyone to the port. Canceled. Every single one. Because here's the thing about being the planner, the fixer, the glue. I knew every password, every booking confirmation. Every single thing was under my name. At 3:24 a.m., I got a text from Jenna. Hey, just checking, did you cancel the snorkeling excursion? It's not showing up in the app. I didn't reply. At 4:11 a.m., Kevin chimed in. Bro, why does the cruise booking say no active reservation? What's going on? Still didn't reply. By 6 a.m., my mom was calling. I let it ring. Then I turned off my phone and went for a walk. I'd expected some fallout, sure. But what happened next was a cascade. Apparently, my parents had already told all their friends about the cruise. Kevin and Jenna had both taken time off work. They'd arranged childcare, dog sitters, automatic timers for their lights. Lisa had apparently bought an entire new beach wardrobe for the trip, tagging it #CruiseQueen on Instagram. And now? Nothing. No trip. No cake. No beach. I'd even canceled their upgraded drink packages. But that wasn't the end. That wasn't even the satisfying part. Because while they were scrambling, emailing support, yelling at customer service reps, trying to rebook at the last minute, and finding everything either sold out or triple the price, I was making arrangements of my own. See, for the last few years, my parents had been living rent-free in a property I owned. Technically, the house was still under my name after I inherited it from my grandfather. I'd let them stay there because it made sense. They didn't have a mortgage. I didn't need the place, and it made me feel like a good son. That changed the moment I saw that text. So I contacted a property management company, arranged a full inspection, sent a legal notice of termination of tenancy. The locks were changed 3 days later. Their name was taken off the utility accounts. I shut down the shared Verizon family plan they were using under my name, of course. Their storage unit? Paid up to the end of the month, then scheduled for clearance. I didn't shout. I didn't write a dramatic email. I just moved my pieces, one by one. But the real kicker? They didn't even realize the cruise was gone until the day before they were supposed to leave. They showed up at the port with suitcases and smiles and matching t-shirts that read, Dad's 65th, ship happens. But there was no check-in, no reservation, no cabin, no cake, no Brandon. And that was just the warm-up. By the time they realized what had happened, it was already too late. I know this because I started getting calls again. Not texts, calls. Voicemails, too. Desperate, confused, some furious, some just pleading. Brandon, honey, it looks like there's been some kind of mistake. Mom's voice crackled through the first message. The cruise line says we're not on the list. Could you call them for us? You booked everything, right? Another one from Kevin. Okay. Dude, not funny. Like, we get it, you're mad. Lisa didn't mean anything by what she said. Just call me. Let's fix this. Jenna didn't leave a voicemail. She just called 7 times in a row. Lisa? She finally messaged me for the first time in weeks. A DM, actually. I know we got off on the wrong foot, Brandon, but this is a really big deal for your dad. Don't ruin his birthday over a miscommunication. A miscommunication. I watched her message sit unread for an hour before I finally clicked seen. Didn't reply, because at that point, it wasn't about the cruise. It was about every family photo I took for them and was told to stand behind the camera. Every, thanks for organizing, I never got. Every holiday I spent doing dishes while the fun ones watched football. Every, Brandon will take care of it, tossed like I was some live-in assistant instead of their son, their brother. I'd spent years giving them the benefit of the doubt, telling myself they didn't mean it, that they were just caught up in the moment, that they loved me, just didn't show it the same way. But when they took my room, my literal bed on the trip I paid for, and gave it to Lisa with a casual, she makes dad laugh more, that was the moment I knew. They didn't forget me. They just didn't think I mattered. And now, they were on the outside. Literally. Because 3 days after the cruise debacle, they got back to the house I used to let them live in, and couldn't get in. I watched from my car, parked across the street, tinted windows up, sunglasses on. I wanted to see it. Not out of cruelty, but because I needed it to feel real. For once, I wanted them to feel what I felt. Excluded. Unwelcome. Small. Mom was the first to try the handle, then the doorbell. Dad followed, fumbling with his keys. I'd had the locks changed the night before. They rang again. Knocked. I watched the confusion morph into irritation, then panic. Kevin pulled out his phone. I could guess what he saw. A forwarded legal notice I'd had emailed and printed, giving them 30 days to vacate the premises due to non-payment and unauthorized subletting. Technically true, thanks to Lisa crashing there without notice a few weeks prior. Jenna stormed to the side of the house and tried the back door. I'd had that reinforced, too. Eventually, they noticed the neighbor watching. The same neighbor who'd once asked me why I never came to the barbecues, then laughed when I said I wasn't invited. She gave me a nod as I drove off that afternoon. The texts turned angrier after that. You had no right. Where are we supposed to go, Brandon? This is insane. You're acting like a stranger. Lisa's post about the cruise quietly disappeared from her feed. Then the real unraveling began. Dad's old business partner texted me to ask why the emergency fund wasn't responding to payment requests. Turns out my name was still attached as co-signer. Another thing I'd been too helpful to change. So I did. I moved the money to a trust under my name. Legal. Clean. I even called to confirm there was no breach of contract. There wasn't. Next came the streaming services. Netflix, Hulu, Spotify family plan, all canceled. Passwords changed. Email logins locked. A week later, I got a call from Mom. I stared at it. Didn't answer. Then another voicemail. She sounded tired. Smaller. Brandon, we don't know what to do. Your dad's sleeping on Kevin's couch, and Jen is staying with friends. I know you're angry, but this is your family. We're not perfect, but we love you. Can we please just talk? I sat on my couch, surrounded by silence. No laughter. No noise. No obligation. Just peace. And then I got another message, from Jenna this time. No greeting, no apology. Just, are you seriously going to throw away your entire family over a joke? That's when something shifted in me. Because it wasn't just a joke. It was a summary. A distillation of every moment I'd been told I was less than. Every time they pushed me aside, then acted shocked when I didn't stick around to pick up the pieces. I thought about replying. Instead, I started writing something else. Not to them. To the lawyer. Because this wasn't just a vacation anymore. This was a full reset. And they hadn't even seen the worst part yet. I didn't reply to Jenna's message. I didn't need to. I was already several steps ahead, drafting documents with my attorney to formalize what had already begun, a clean separation, emotionally, financially, legally. There was no dramatic confrontation, no screaming match. I didn't throw plates or shout that I was done, because I had been done. Quietly, slowly, in the way you stop watering a plant not out of malice, but because you realize it was never yours to take care of in the first place. The lawyer's office was a modest place, tucked between a bakery and a tailor shop downtown. Nothing fancy, but it felt decisive. We met in person. I brought a list, neatly typed, cross-referenced. My name was still on more than I realized. My parents' health insurance copay account, a line of credit they'd been using for years in case of emergencies. The registration on the family car, still in my name, from when I helped refinance it 5 years ago. I told the lawyer to transfer, revoke, dissolve, or close everything, whichever would sever the ties fastest. And that storage unit? I had it opened. I didn't throw anything away. I'm not that person. But I paid for movers to have everything boxed up and delivered to Kevin's place, since that's where Dad was staying. The invoice was taped to the top of the boxes. Around this time, the tone of the messages shifted again. They weren't angry now. They were confused. Hurt. Almost performative. Brandon, this isn't like you. Can we please just sit down like adults? You're being vindictive. Vindictive. That one stuck with me. The irony was so sharp, it almost made me laugh. Because for 34 years, I had never been anything but understanding, forgiving, accommodating. I missed college graduation because Kevin totaled his car and needed a ride from the police station. I loaned Jenna money for rent, twice, without ever asking for it back. I sent Mom and Dad on a trip to Vermont last fall after Dad's surgery, just to lift their spirits. I didn't do it for praise. I did it because I believed that's what family was supposed to be. But they didn't. Not really. To them, my generosity wasn't love, it was inventory. A resource. Something to be allocated, used, taken for granted. That became painfully clear the day I found out about the voicemail. It came from someone I hadn't spoken to in years, Uncle Dennis. My dad's younger brother. He and Dad had a falling out over something petty. Dad said Dennis borrowed money and never paid it back. Dennis said Dad lied about a loan that never happened. Who knows what the truth is? But when Dennis called me out of the blue, I almost didn't answer. His voice was lower than I remembered. Slower. Like every word had to be pulled up from somewhere deep. Brandon, I don't want to get in the middle of anything. But I think you should know. Your mom left a message on your aunt's phone the other day. Didn't realize it was still recording. She was venting about you. Said this whole thing is just another example of how you always act like you're better than everyone. Said you never understood what it means to sacrifice. And that you're punishing them because you can't stand seeing anyone else happy. He paused. I thought you should hear it from me. I didn't say much. Just thanked him. Told him I appreciated the call. But after I hung up, I just sat in silence. It wasn't even the words that hurt. It was the confirmation. The realization that even now, even after everything, they didn't see what they'd done wrong. They were still casting themselves as the victims in a story I never wanted to write. The next day, I updated my will. Removed all family members as beneficiaries. Created a new trust. One that would go to scholarships for first-gen college students. Quietly, no plaques or buildings with my name on them. Just something useful. Something real. That same week, I changed my number. New carrier. New account. New phone. The only people who got the number were my assistant, my lawyer, and my best friend Sam. Sam was the one who came over that night with 2 six-packs and a bag of tacos. He didn't say much. Just handed me a beer and asked if I wanted to watch anything that wasn't about family. We watched an old action movie with terrible dialogue and predictable explosions. It was perfect. That was when I got the knock on my door. I wasn't expecting anyone. No deliveries, no appointments. Sam muted the TV, and I went to check the peephole. It was Jenna, hair tied back, dark circles under her eyes, clutching her phone in one hand and what looked like a folder in the other. She didn't look angry. She looked worn down. I didn't open the door. She knocked again, softer this time. "Brandon, I just want to talk." I watched her from behind the door, not moving, not speaking. Then she said it. "It's about Dad. Something happened." Another soft knock. Then, quieter, he fell off a ladder. In Kevin's backyard. He's okay. Sprained wrist. Bruised ribs. But he's scared. He's asking for you. I didn't say anything. Not through the door, not in my head. My silence wasn't cold. It was clarity. I wasn't the panicked, eager to please son anymore. I didn't feel guilt surging up or some compulsion to rush to his side and fix everything. I just felt curious. Curious what angle this was. Curious if they still thought this was a game of leverage. "I know we messed up," Jenna said after a long pause. "I know you don't trust us. Maybe you never should have. But he's asking for you, Brandon. Not Kevin. Not even Lisa. You." I finally opened the door. Not because she said the right thing, but because I was ready to look her in the eye. And when I did, I saw it. Not manipulation. Not a carefully rehearsed script. Just exhaustion. And maybe a sliver of understanding. She looked like she hadn't slept in days. Her voice, when she spoke again, was raw. "He said he wanted to apologize." I nodded. "So let him." She looked confused. "To you, Brandon. Not in a group text. Not through me. To you." I stepped outside and closed the door behind me. Didn't invite her in. We stood on the porch for a minute before she handed me the folder. I flipped it open. Inside was a handwritten letter in Dad's blocky, uneven handwriting. It wasn't long. "Brandon, I'm not good at saying the right things. Never have been. I know I've leaned on you too much. Expected too much. And I know I never really thanked you the way I should have. You always picked up the slack, and I made it worse by acting like it didn't matter. I let people talk down to you. Sometimes I joined in. That's on me. I'm sorry. You didn't deserve any of it. I hope you're happy now. You deserve to be. Dad." I stood there, rereading it, waiting to feel something. Anger. Vindication. Sadness. But all I felt was the truth of it. It wasn't a perfect apology, but it was real. Jenna looked at me. "He didn't want to call. Said he figured if he called, you'd hang up. If he texted, you'd block him." She wasn't wrong. "I'm not here to guilt you," she added. "Just wanted you to know. He's trying." I nodded, closed the folder, and handed it back. "Tell him I got the letter. Do you want to?" "No." She nodded again, slowly, and for the first time in years, she didn't argue. She just said, "Okay," and walked back to her car. I watched her drive off. The next day, I sent a small box to Kevin's house. Inside was a backup copy of the letter, laminated, and a post-it note. "Thanks for the letter. I accept the apology. But we're done. Take care." I didn't need more than that. I wasn't coming back. I didn't need a dramatic confrontation, or a teary reunion, or some performative forgiveness arc. I wasn't interested in slowly letting them back into my life one text at a time. That chapter was closed. Instead, I spent the next few months building something better. I officially launched the scholarship fund I'd created, naming it after my grandfather, the one who left me the house that caused so much drama. I put the first 3 students through community college debt-free. Met with them, talked with them, gave them the kind of support I wished I'd had at their age. Sam and I took a trip to Portugal, something I'd always wanted to do but kept putting off for later. I stood on the cliffs above the ocean and felt, for the first time in decades, like I wasn't holding my breath anymore. Back home, I bought a small condo in the city, sold the family house for a decent profit, and used the money to invest in a small nonprofit incubator for first-gen entrepreneurs. I didn't broadcast any of it, didn't post online, didn't update my family. I just lived. About a year after the cruise that never happened, I got a letter in the mail. No return address. Inside was a photo, Dad in his recliner, arm in a cast, smiling awkwardly at the camera. On the back, it said, "We still talk about you. Lisa finally figured out how to cook that stew you liked. She burns it. Every time. Thought you'd appreciate that. K." I didn't respond, but I smiled. It wasn't closure. That word's too neat. Too final. What I got was freedom. Freedom from always being the helper, the fixer, the emotional garbage disposal. Freedom to choose who gets access to me and who doesn't. I never stopped caring about them. I just stopped letting them treat me like I was disposable. They can live with the consequences. And I? I finally started living on my own terms. Hey everyone, I'm Avery, and I really need some advice on how I handled things. But first, let me give you some context so you understand why I did what I did. I'm 23 years old, and I've always had to fight for everything. I never got the luxury of handouts, not even from my own family. Growing up, it was clear that I was the invisible kid in the family, the one who was always expected to be perfect, yet always left to fend for myself. My younger brother, Jason, on the other hand, could do no wrong. He's 20 now, but back when we were growing up, he was always the center of attention. He was the one who got the new clothes, the latest gadgets, the trips. He was the golden child. I, on the other hand, had to grind just to get by. And that's fine. I'm not bitter about it. Okay, maybe I am a little, but I always thought I'd earn their respect. But things really started to shift when Jason crossed a line that I honestly didn't think was possible. I'd never been financially irresponsible. I've always been careful with money, always made sure my credit was in check, because I knew the consequences of not doing so. I even had a side hustle, helping people with their resumes, and put a decent amount of effort into keeping myself afloat. I wasn't swimming in cash, but I managed. Jason? Not so much. He has always relied on my parents for everything. They paid for his car, his college tuition, all of his expenses. Even when he was in high school, if he wanted something, my parents got it for him. He never had to worry about money, he had it easy. And I had to watch all of it happen while I was the one doing the hard work, never receiving the same kind of support. But this was a whole different level. It all started about 3 months ago. It was a Saturday night, and I was sitting in my bedroom after a long day. I'd just gotten home from a 12-hour shift at my part-time job, and I was about to wind down for the night. I usually check my finances before bed, just a habit of mine, nothing special, but that night, I noticed something strange. I pulled up my bank account, expecting to see the usual numbers. I was in the middle of budgeting, figuring out how to pay off the last few bills for the month. But then my stomach dropped. I saw multiple charges, totaling over $5,000, across several credit cards. Some of them were from places I'd never heard of, others from restaurants and shops that I definitely hadn't visited. In a panic, I began scrolling through the transactions, trying to make sense of it. Hotel bookings, a couple of online shopping sprees, even a high-end restaurant in another state. There was no way I could have been there. No way I could have bought those things. I froze for a second, trying to process what I was looking at. Then it hit me like a ton of bricks. My brother, Jason. Jason had somehow gotten his hands on my credit card details. I immediately texted him. I couldn't wait until morning. I needed answers now. My fingers were shaking as I typed out the message. Jason, why are there charges on my credit cards that I didn't make? Are you seriously using my cards? A few minutes went by before he responded. His reply was classic Jason, casual, dismissive. What are you talking about? I haven't used your cards. Maybe you're just losing track of your own spending. I felt a flash of rage. I didn't respond right away. I didn't need to. Instead, I dug deeper into my bank app and found that all of these charges were coming from accounts and places that Jason had access to, like his online shopping account, which I'd found him using before, and even his buddy's hotel reservation. It didn't take long to connect the dots. I knew, without a doubt, that Jason had stolen my credit card info and used it for himself. And not just once, he had been using it repeatedly. The next morning, I went straight to him. Jason was lounging on the couch in the living room, gaming as usual. He barely even looked up when I entered. I stormed up to him, holding my phone in front of his face, showing him the mountain of charges. Jason, I said, voice shaking with anger, explain this. Why are there $5,000 in charges on my credit cards from places you've been? Did you steal my card info? He paused the game, his eyes widening for just a split second, just enough for me to catch the guilty look before he shifted back to his usual cocky grin. What? Me? Nah, that wasn't me. You probably just didn't notice your own spending, Avery, he said with a shrug, trying to act casual. I was fuming. I felt my fist clench. Cut the crap. This is fraud. I'm reporting it. Whoa, calm down, he said, leaning back on the couch with an exaggerated sigh. I didn't do anything. Why are you always trying to make me look bad? He barely even cared. He wasn't even trying to pretend like he was sorry. And that's when I realized something. This wasn't the first time he had done something like this. He'd always gotten away with things in the past, and now he was testing the waters again. This time, though, he had crossed a line. The tension between us continued to build after that. That evening, after I'd reported the fraudulent charges to my bank, I got a call from my parents. They told me to come over and talk. I figured they might be on my side. After all, I was the victim in this situation, right? Wrong. When I walked into the living room, they were sitting there with disappointed looks on their faces, as if I'd done something wrong. Son, my mom started, her voice unusually calm. We need to talk about the credit card situation. I immediately got defensive. I've already reported it to the bank. Jason used my cards, and I'm not going to just pay off the charges. That's the thing, though, my dad chimed in. Jason is going through a rough time, and you need to help him out. I stared at them, my jaw hanging open in disbelief. What? Help him out? I'm the one who's been scammed. Family comes first, Avery, my mom said, her tone growing colder. You need to keep the peace and just pay it off. Jason's going through a phase, and we're asking you to help him. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. They were blaming me for not helping him, like I was the one who had stolen from them. And that's when they hit me with the ultimatum. If you don't pay this off, my dad said, his voice like ice, you're cut off. No more family support. No more help with anything. For a moment, I stood there, just stunned. They were giving me an ultimatum over Jason's fraud. I was beyond angry. This wasn't just a family issue anymore. It was about respect. It was about self-respect. And that's when I made my decision. Enjoy your lying son, I said, turning away from them, voice shaking with rage. I'm done. And I walked out of their house. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest as I stepped out of the house, slamming the door behind me. The sound of it echoed in my ears, and for a split second, I felt this strange sense of liberation. It was like I was free from their hold, finally breaking away from the toxic cycle they created. But that feeling was quickly replaced by a bitter, gnawing anger. I didn't want to just walk away. I wanted them to understand how wrong they were. I wanted them to see just how far Jason had pushed me, just how much they had ignored my boundaries for years. But as I walked away from their front door, I knew there was no going back. I tried to keep my head high, but with each step, the weight of what had just happened started to sink in. My parents weren't just dismissing the fraud they'd enabled. They were actively siding with Jason, the person who had betrayed me. I couldn't believe how quickly they'd turned on me, how easily they were willing to discard me just to protect their perfect little son. The same son who had stolen from me and lied straight to my face. I couldn't understand how they didn't see that. The next few days were a blur. I spent most of my time at home, just staring at my phone, trying to figure out what to do next. Should I really just cut all ties with them? Or should I try to reach out and make them see reason? But as the days passed, and I didn't hear a word from my parents, it became clear they weren't going to reach out to me. They were going to let Jason slide, and they'd just ignore me until I fell in line. I couldn't believe it. I didn't even want to speak to them anymore. It wasn't just the betrayal with the credit cards, it was everything. The way they had always prioritized Jason over me. The way they never even gave me a chance to voice my frustrations. I felt like I had spent my entire life being invisible to them, and now they were finally showing me exactly how little I mattered. But the anger that burned inside me wasn't going to just fizzle out. I spent the next few nights planning. I wasn't just going to walk away and leave it at that. No, I had to hit them where it hurt. I had to make sure Jason understood that there were consequences for his actions. I thought about reporting the fraud to the authorities, about taking legal action. But as I sat there, something else hit me. Jason had been getting away with things for too long, thanks to my parents always bailing him out. It wasn't just about the money. It was about teaching him a lesson, about showing him that there was a price to pay for being a manipulative, deceitful person. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized that the best revenge wasn't going to be some petty revenge over a few $1,000s. No, my revenge would be exposing him for what he truly was, someone who couldn't even take responsibility for his own mistakes. That's when the idea came to me. If my parents were going to turn a blind eye to everything, then I'd make sure they couldn't avoid the truth. I knew that Jason's reputation wasn't exactly spotless. He had a few skeletons in his closet. Everyone did, I suppose, but Jason's were a bit more public. There were rumors about him borrowing money from people and never paying it back. Stories about how he'd tricked people into doing things for him. Nothing that was technically illegal, but enough to paint him as a shady character. And I knew one thing. If I could get all those stories together, it would force my parents to confront the reality of who their precious son really was. I started reaching out to people Jason had wronged in the past, people I'd known from high school or from his old social circle. It didn't take long for me to find a few that were willing to talk. Some of them were still angry with Jason for how he'd manipulated them or used them, and they were more than happy to share their experiences. It felt a little dirty, digging up all this stuff, but I was doing it for one reason, to make my parents understand that they couldn't just let him walk all over me and them. Meanwhile, Jason was living life like nothing had changed. He was still posting on social media like nothing was wrong. He had his usual group of friends around him, partying and playing video games, acting like he hadn't just destroyed his relationship with me. I was watching all of this from the sidelines, and with each post, each story he shared, I could feel the anger simmering more. He was living his best life, with zero consequences, while I was left to clean up the mess he'd made. But I wasn't going to let him get away with it. I knew that if I could just get my parents to see what kind of person he really was, things would change. If I could just make them see that their son wasn't the innocent little angel they always thought he was, maybe they'd stop enabling him. Then, one evening, everything came to a head. I was sitting at my kitchen table, staring at my phone, when I saw a message from my mom. It was short and to the point. "We need to talk. Can you come over?" My heart skipped a beat. I hadn't heard from them in days, and the fact that my mom was reaching out made me feel a little hopeful, like maybe they were starting to see things from my perspective. But as soon as I got to their house, that hope was shattered. Jason was sitting there, on the couch, looking smug as ever. He didn't even look up when I walked in. My mom and dad were sitting across from him, and as soon as I sat down, my mom's face was full of that same cold disappointment. "Avery," my dad started, his tone clipped, "we've talked about this. You need to stop dragging our family through the mud. You're the one causing the problems, not Jason." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. This was their response? This was what they had to say after everything? I stood up, the anger rising in me again. "You have no idea what you're talking about," I snapped. "You're defending someone who's stolen from me, lied to me, and used me. And now, you're blaming me for the problems?" Jason just smirked. "You're just mad because I'm doing better than you, Avery. Maybe if you weren't so obsessed with everything being perfect, you'd understand that family has to stick together." That was it. Jason's smug grin was enough to make my blood boil. I could feel my fists clenching, my entire body vibrating with frustration. But I wasn't going to let him get the last word. Not this time. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. The anger was almost suffocating, but I had to stay calm. I had to make them see, really see, just how wrong they were. "You think I'm mad because you're doing better than me?" I said, my voice dangerously quiet. "You really believe that?" Jason's grin faltered, but only for a moment. He shifted uncomfortably in his seat, but there was still that air of superiority hanging around him. He thought he was untouchable, that he had one. But I wasn't done yet. "No, Jason. I'm mad because you used me," I continued, taking a step closer to him. "You took advantage of me, and you didn't even blink an eye when you did it. You stole from me, my money, my future, and now you're sitting there pretending you're some kind of victim. But you know what?" I paused, glaring at my parents, their faces blank with disbelief. "I'm not the one who's been selfish, Jason. That's you. And if you think I'm going to sit back and let you get away with it, just because you're family, then you're sorely mistaken." The room fell silent. My parents looked like they were trying to process what I was saying, but I could see it in their eyes. They still didn't get it. They were still on Jason's side, still choosing him over me. They didn't care that he'd ruined my credit, lied about the charges, or left me to clean up his mess. All they cared about was maintaining the illusion that he was the golden child. "Well, I'm done," I said, my voice cold now. "I'm done being your scapegoat. Done being the one who always has to fix everything, while you both coddle him and let him get away with murder." Jason snorted, clearly unbothered. "You're just bitter because mom and dad love me more." He leaned back in his chair, completely oblivious to the depth of the hurt he was causing. And that did it. That was the last straw. I leaned in, my face inches from his, and for the first time in years, I let him see just how much I hated him in that moment. "You want to talk about love, Jason?" I whispered, every word dripping with venom. "Let me tell you something. Mom and dad may love you, but it's not because of who you are, it's because they've enabled every damn thing you've ever done. They've supported you in every lie, every manipulation, and they've turned a blind eye to everything you've done to hurt me. You're not loved because of who you are, Jason. You're loved because they don't want to face the fact that they've failed as parents. And that's something you'll never understand. You're so busy playing the victim that you can't even see how much you've taken from me." For a moment, it felt like I had hit him with a gut punch. His eyes widened, and he looked like he was about to say something, but then my dad spoke up, his voice sharp and defensive. "Avery, that's enough," he snapped. "You're out of line. This isn't how we talk about family." I shook my head. "No, this is exactly how we need to talk about family. The truth isn't pretty, but it's the truth. And if you can't handle it, then maybe you need to stop pretending everything is fine when it's falling apart. My mom looked at me with that same cold, distant gaze, and I could tell she was on the verge of defending Jason again. But before she could speak, I held up a hand, cutting her off. You want to know what's been bothering me all these years? I continued, my voice unwavering. It's not just the money or the fact that Jason's ruined my life with his lies. It's that you two have always chosen him over me. Always. And I've had enough of it. Maybe I don't fit into your idea of a perfect family, but I'm not going to keep pretending I do. You'll never understand the toll it's taken on me. You'll never get it, because you're too busy making excuses for him. I could feel the weight of those words hanging in the air. I wasn't just confronting them about the money. I was confronting everything, their neglect, their favoritism, their blind loyalty to Jason. And for the first time in my life, I didn't care if they were angry at me. Jason's smug grin had finally faded, replaced by a look of pure irritation. You think this is about me? This is about you, Avery. You're just bitter because you're a failure. You couldn't get things together like I did. So now you're trying to make everyone else the bad guy, so you don't have to face your own shortcomings. I could feel my hands shaking. The words hurt, but I wasn't going to let him get away with them. I didn't fail, Jason, I said, my voice dangerously quiet. But you will. You're so busy playing the victim that you'll never realize you've burned every bridge you've ever had. And trust me, I'm done trying to save you. My dad stood up, shaking his head in disbelief. Avery, stop it. This needs to end right now. You're being dramatic, and you need to respect your family. You've gone too far. I laughed bitterly. Respect? You want respect? Then start respecting me. Start treating me like I matter. For a moment, there was silence. I could hear my heartbeat thundering in my ears. Jason wasn't smirking anymore. My parents weren't defending him. It was like the tension in the room was so thick that it could cut through the walls. But then, just as I was about to speak again, Jason sneered. Whatever. It doesn't matter. You'll come crawling back. You always do. I stood there, frozen, every muscle in my body screaming at me to walk away, to leave this behind. But I didn't. I couldn't. Instead, I looked at Jason one last time, shaking my head in disbelief. I won't come crawling back, Jason. I'm done. And trust me, you'll regret it. And with that, I turned on my heel and walked out of their house for what I hoped would be the last time. It's been a few months now, and I've had more time to reflect on everything that happened. My life has slowly started to get back to normal, even better in some ways. But as for my family, well, let's just say that karma's a real thing, and it doesn't forget. The first thing I did after walking out of their house was get in touch with the credit card companies. I reported the fraud, explained what had happened, and froze all the accounts that Jason had somehow gotten his hands on. They were understanding, and I was able to clear my name. My credit score took a hit, but nothing like what it could have been if I hadn't acted so quickly. I was still angry, but more than that, I felt relieved. Like a weight had been lifted off me. What happened next? Well, it was a slow burn for Jason and my parents. First, Jason's little act of playing the victim didn't last long. He had his shiny job, his perfect life, and his constant posts about his success on social media, his typical ego boost. But then, out of nowhere, his job started crumbling. They downsized, and guess who got laid off? That's right, Jason. No more cushy paycheck. No more free ride. What followed was even worse. It wasn't just the job loss, it was the lifestyle crash. Jason's expensive habits caught up with him. He was drowning in debt, and there was no way he could keep up with it. He tried asking my parents for help, but they were tired of bailing him out. They had been helping him for years, and now they were facing their own financial issues, mostly because they'd kept running up their own credit cards to keep Jason happy. It wasn't just the money, either. My parents started fighting more. The constant pressure to support Jason was slowly eating away at them. The bills piled up, arguments turned into shouting matches, and the strain was obvious. They couldn't even keep up the facade of the perfect family anymore. I wasn't going to rub it in, but I couldn't help feeling a little satisfied watching their world implode. Maybe it was petty of me, but after everything I'd been through, I felt like they finally got a taste of the consequences of enabling Jason. As for me, well, I did a lot of growing during those months. I took control of my life, my finances, and most importantly, I stopped feeling like I owed them anything. I finally started getting some good opportunities at work, and I was able to move into a better apartment on my own, something I had always dreamed of but never thought I could afford. And then, the moment of revenge finally came. It wasn't dramatic or over the top. It wasn't some big public blowout. It was just simple, quiet, and perfectly fitting. I got a call from a family friend who had somehow managed to stay in touch with my parents, even though I had completely cut them off. Turns out, Jason had tried to reach out to them for help again, but this time he was asking for more than money. He was asking them to co-sign a loan for him. He needed a big lump sum to pay off his mounting debt. My parents, after everything, said no. But here's the kicker. They were so desperate to keep Jason from spiraling that they started blaming me. They said, Avery should have stepped in. She should have helped him. As if after everything they'd done to me, I was supposed to play the role of the savior, the one who rescued Jason from the consequences of his own actions. I found out through the family friend that Jason had actually tried to turn the whole thing into a sob story, telling people that I was heartless for not helping him after everything he had done for me. Of course, that was the narrative he was spinning, and for a while, it seemed like he was getting away with it. But then, the best part came. A few weeks after their latest request for me to bail Jason out, I got a message from my parents. It was brief, just a simple text, asking if I was willing to meet up. They said they wanted to work things out. I couldn't help but laugh. I didn't respond. I had no intention of going back, of giving them another chance to disappoint me. But I knew that I had one. Jason was alone. My parents were scrambling. They could no longer protect him from his own actions. And I had finally let go of the toxic relationship that had kept me stuck for years. I'm not proud of enjoying this, but I can't lie. It felt good to see them face the reality of their choices. Maybe it wasn't the kind of revenge I had imagined at first, but it was enough. Jason learned the hard way that no amount of family favoritism could save him from his own downfall. As for me, I finally learned that I don't need them. I found peace in moving on. I'm done trying to please people who will never appreciate me. And I'm done fixing the messes that they've made for me. If they want to keep playing the game of family loyalty, they'll have to do it without me. Because in the end, family doesn't come first. Not when it costs you everything to be there.